Hey everybody, I'm back again. Today is going to be a little different. Today is not going to be like a laddering session or anything like that. Today I'm actually going to be discussing my personal VR for ADV Overused. I went through and I threw something together relatively quickly, but it's still pretty accurate, I think, to my thoughts. There will be a link in the description to a spreadsheet where you can view the VR in like text form. I'll also maybe include an Imgur link. I don't know. We'll see if I want to upload this to anything or not. But yeah, so with that being said, I think I'm going to start from the bottom and count up. So we're going to start with some Pokemon that I think are pretty fringe viable. Still very good, of course. But, well, not still very good. Still, they're, like, these Pokemon have seen use. I don't think they're worth putting on an actual VR. But they have something in ADV OU that is worth talking about, I think. And the first of these Pokemon is going to be Alakazam. Now, Alakazam in ADV has a bit of a weird niche. His niche is his speed stat plus his special attack stat and access to Calm Mind and frankly excellent coverage, along with some cool utility moves like Knock Off, Trick, Encore, Recover, etc., Thunder Wave, stuff like that. And he's definitely not like unusable. The thing that holds him back, I would say, is the fact that he is an Okomon in a tier where there are hardly any Okos. So, does that look better? I don't know if that made it look better or not, actually. But, so, what you're going to be doing with Alakazam for the most part is you're going to be setting up a Calm Mind as your opponent goes to, say, their Tyranitar. And you're going to do, like, 60 with HP Grass and die. Or, another example is they go to, say, something that doesn't die to Psychic but can kill it back. T-Tar is the biggest example. But something like Dugtrio as well can also win the tie, but also something like Claydol, right? Look at this defense stat. Like, this Claydol EQ kills this. And it doesn't even come close to dying to anything from +1. So, the main problem, it also has, obviously cannot deal with Blissey to save its life unless you run Encore, and then you're handicapping your coverage for other Pokemon. So, the problem that Alakazam has in this meta is basically that it's trying to do too much with not enough really where it matters. I think this tier really values more bulky setup users like Celebi, Jirachi, Suicune from the Calm Mind side, and from the DD side you have stuff like Mence, Gira, T-Tar. Like, it's just Alakazam just is too it's too frail to really do its job. I do think it's interesting though, and I think it might still be a little underexplored. I wonder if maybe there's some weird Encore shit you can do, like in Gen 2 or in Gen 1. But yeah, if you want a tier where Alakazam can really shine, go play Gen 5. It is, frankly, really broken in that tier. Alright, so next up, we're going to talk about Amperos. This Pokemon is... I don't want to say it's good, because it's really not, but it's cool. It has the niche of being an electric type with Focus Punch, which is, as you can imagine, is a very easy way of threatening Blissey. However, I forgot to mention this about Alakazam, it's also very Spikes weak. Ampharos is super duper Spikes weak. It's a decent T-Bolt switch in, 90-90 is like okay, but when you factor in the fact that you're probably going to be coming in on Spikes, and you can't really do anything back to the electric guys, like, the most you're going to be hitting him with is, like, Thunderbolt on Zapdos, which will do a lot off the special attack, no doubt, but what happens if they bring in, like, a Jolteon, you know? It's like Jolteon kind of just sits on this, and there's also the fact of it's really slow, so, like, yes, obviously you can invest up to, like, here or so to kind of get it out of the really slow stuff range, but the problem is you're not Okoing Tara unless you Focus Punch it. 2, you still have to Focus Punch the Blissey, and it's not even gonna Oko. This attack stat is pretty pitiful for that. And it's like it's a good pick into like Skarmbless type stuff. Like that's where it functions. But in other matchups, like especially if they have like a Dugtrio, this thing just sits around and flounders if their opponent sends out Dugtrio. And the problem is usually these teams are relying on Amperos a little bit defensively as well. And so if Doug picks it off, it's not a situation where it's like, oh, I let my Hera or my Loom get trapped, now my Mence comes in for free. This is usually on more balanced type stuff where it fits. So it's really not like a good look. It does have a lot of cool moves though, and I like seeing it used. It's a pretty cool Pokemon. Next up, we'll have Articuno. Articuno is a Pokemon I think is pretty cool personally. It's something I've tried to use in the past. Really hard to build with for one, but its primary niche is, given its typing and its special defense stat, it can come in on Pert very freely and get things like Roar or HP Grass off, or just click Ice Beam. It's really a nuisance for teams that are relying on Pert like a lot. Like if you run this along with some other physical attackers, a lot of the time it's pretty hard for Pert to come in. It also has a niche as a Heal Bell user on 6 Levitators, which otherwise I don't think it gets access to outside of a couple Pokemon. I don't remember if... Actually, I don't want to say that because I don't remember if that's actually true. But it is... I know ABR has used it for that in the past, I think. And there was somebody else as well, but I forget who. But yeah, so that's... Articuno also does have decently strong Stab Ice Beams, which is a... Stab Ice Beam is a little rare in this meta. Normally you want to be switching into non-Stab Ice Beams, but... That's why things like Jinx and Lapras can be a little awkward on occasion, is because a lot of the time teams are still using, or some of the time anyway, teams are still using grass types as their like Hydro Pump switching, and if you're trying to switch into a lot of time if your opponent is running like Celebi over Blissey, like all of a sudden Articuno is a giant threat. It does have a lot of problems, however, and one of the main ones is the fact that it is ice flying in a rock type centric meta. Not a good look, especially with literally everything. All of the physical attackers run like rock or steel coverage a lot of the time, and the ones that don't are hitting it hard anyway. It almost never dies in one to anything, even the quad effective hits. Like sometimes it lives those anyway, but it's like it's still like it's not doing anything back to just about anything that isn't like a Swampert is the other problem. Like Ice Beam, it looks great on paper until you click it into like DD-Tar on switch in and you get forced out. And it's just like you literally can't do you can't do anything to it, because you can invest a little speed to get faster than DD-Tar, but then you're sacrificing that special bulk that's so important, and you're sacrificing that special attack that's really necessary to do anything. Like this is really, with no invest, this is kind of not. That's not the one. But yeah, that's Articuno. And I don't think by any means that these Pokemon can't work. For reference, I think it's just harder, like a lot harder for these Pokemon in this tier to work, and they really only work against very specific things. Dragonite is the next Pokemon down here. Dragonite is a little weird. He's kind of like Mence, but like not good. Okay, Dragonite has access to Dragon Dance, I believe. Yep, so Dragon Dance. The problem is it doesn't get the move to kill grass types that Mence gets, or it can't really run HP Flying. Well, it can, but it's like, if you run HP Flying, you don't get Rock Slide as well. That's another big one. So the big problem is Rock Slide. I completely misspoke. So you could run like HP Rock to make up for that, but then you're not running HP Flying. You could run like Iron Tail or Steel Wing, I guess, but those are not great moves for other reasons. Other than that, it gets very cool special coverage, as it always has. Ice moves, electric moves, fire moves, access to Heal Bell, Focus Punch. It has like a cool toolbox and good attacking stats and decent bulk. It just never like does enough, really, is my problem with it. Because a lot of the time, if you're running a Dragonite, you just want a Mence instead. Mence offers greater defensive utility too in the roles that it's supposed to fill because of Intimidate. It can switch into fighting types way easier off that. Whereas Dragonite has a pretty hard time even like... Dragonite, I think it's 2-hit KO'd by Hero Rock Slide. I'm not sure. But yeah, the other issue with Dragonite is it doesn't get Roost in this gen. So it really doesn't have much HP to play with. If it still wants to invest to make its attacks do damage, it really doesn't have that much HP to play with. But yeah, that's Dragonite. Dragonite is admittedly a Pokemon I don't know a whole lot about. Dragonite might deserve to be a tier up actually, but it's like, I don't know. I've never made like a serious attempt to use it, but the times that I've tried it in the past have been very not good. So next up, Entei. Entei is really only notable in that it is a fire type with Calm Mind, which seems very cool, right? Like you could run Sub-CM Fire Grass, and like that seems like a good set. The problem is a couple specific Pokemon. One is Blissey, which you can kind of circumvent with Roar, but then you're dropping either Sub or Grass, and it's just like really awkward. If you drop Grass, you can't get through Purd either, and it's just like agonizing. And the other option is, or the other Pokemon is Dugtrio. That's a big issue for this. There's not really much Entei can do about Doug. It's kind of in the same vein as Amperos, where it kind of just flails if the opponent has a Doug. Like you can get your one kill, sure, but that's all it's getting. And with a sweeper that with a Pokemon that requires as much setup as Entei does to do anything, you really want it to be doing more than that. It's very cool though. This is definitely a C Pokemon. Super Epic Ampharos put me onto this guy. He's definitely has some stuff. But that is about the extent of what I would say. So next up in this low tier, we'll go to Exeggutor. I'm gonna try to speed it up just a little bit. Egg is pretty cool. For those of you who know the C Team Broken Sun, Egg is very, very featured there. It's cool in that it gets access to Sleep Powder, and it's Sleep Powder and Explosion is its main niche, but it can also set up Sun for itself and start going nuts with Solar Beam plus Hidden Power, HP Fire, or HP Ice. The other thing, too, is it does get Stun Spore, which means it can do a similar thing to Loom, where it can sleep and then stun something. It also gets a very cool combination in Wish Boom, which is kind of like a weird healing wish. Kind of. I've never seen it, like, actually work to the extent that it does in theory, but it's pretty cool. Because what happens is, so... say you wish, they go to their Bliss, you blow up, ends the turn, and then you wish up your physical attacker and you start going nuts, or something like that, right? Like it's like a healing wish that does a bit of chip with Explosion or gets a kill, which is interesting. It's not really something that's like usable, but it's very cool, I think. Okay, so for the next Pokemon here, I'm just gonna delete as we go. I'm only putting this Pokemon on here because I've seen it used before by, I think, Marowak. We have Flareon. Flareon's niche is a fire type with Flash Fire, which is only accomplished by Houndoom, I believe. And then its secondary niche is being a fire type with Wish, which is something that fits on a select few stall teams, basically. It folds to Dugtrio as hell. There's not really much you can do about that. As a stall team, you really don't want to be... well, as a stall team, you can just punish with your Scarm, but it's still just like... you don't want to be... It's a no Dugfish, basically, on like a Stallier type build, which is... It's fine for what it is, but it's like not that great, honestly. Next up, we have a favorite of many in the community. We have Blayly. I like Blayly, but I don't think it's very good. It has a very small but very cool move pool. It gets moves like the main moves that it gets that are cool are Spikes, Taunt, and Explosion. So if you throw a Salac Berry on this and you EV it to live like a Mixman's Fire Blast or something, all of a sudden your Blayly, if you have a Dug in the back, your Blayly is essentially a Jinx that sets spikes instead of sleeping, which is pretty cool. I've tried to use it with a secondary Suicide Spiker like Smeargle, and I haven't found like a back three after Smeargle, Blayly, Dug that really like functions all that well, but it's something I'm working on. I think it could be pretty cool. Glalie is another mon that maybe also deserves to be a tier up. I just think it's really extremely fringe and should like, I don't know. Next up is a Pokemon that I don't think is very good, but I really like. We have Golduck. Now, what Golduck's niche is so you guys know what Scissor does, right? Where it's a physical last mon, like setup sweeper with agility and SD, immune to sand. Golduck can do that, but on the special side. So you throw a Salac Berry on it with Cloud 9, it's immune to sand. And you run something like CM, Hydro, Ice Beam, and Endure. All of a sudden, like, this looks pretty threatening versus a lot of teams. The main issue with this guy is Blissey and also Fat Water types. Fat Water types being more of an issue than Blissey because, well, you can just kind of Dug Blissey on a lot of teams it's on. It's not that simple, obviously, but it's more, it's at least you have, like, an easier way to deal with it than the Fat Water types, which you basically just have to blow up on or hope to kill with an Electric type or something. But yeah. He's pretty cool. He's just very limited in what in the situations that he can endgame in. Next up, we have Lapras. Again, I'm trying to go a little quicker just to get through this. Lapras is... I've only ever seen Lapras used by C, I think. But C did beat Asta with Lapras. Lapras has a couple cool niches. It has Heal Bell, which is pretty cool, with decent bulk. It, of course, has the classic Water-type combination of Hydro, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, so you can do that to your heart's content. Gets Roar, too, so it's pretty cool with Spikes. It also gets Perish Song, which is a very interesting tech. If you Perish Song plus, like... Perish Song plus sub or sub-tech to Dug is a way to basically secure kills, and a lot of people have tried it with Jinx before, but there's a while ago where I was trying to build something with Perish Lapras, which was, it didn't really work, but it was like, it's an interesting concept. It's something that needs to be explored more, I think. Then we'll go to Mantine. Mantine's another Pokemon that I've really only seen used by C, but it's pretty cool. There's a very funny screenshot of it doing 74% to Blissey with Hydro Pump. To be entirely clear, the conditions for that happening were, it was in the rain, I think, and it got past 3 CMs, but Mantine is bulky enough to the point where it can receive CMs on anything that isn't like a Thunderbolt or a Boom. So it's a pretty cool receiver in that aspect. It also learns agility naturally, which is pretty cool. I didn't put Mantine on there, but yeah, it learns agility, has good coverage, it's Rock Slide for some fucking reason. And it also has application on stall teams in a more like traditional, this is what you would expect from Mantine kind of sense, where it's a water absorber that gets Haze, like Haze, Toxic, you know, Surf Ice. That's like a classic stall Mantine set. I've had that used into me before. It can be very good in the right circumstances. Next up, we're going to go to Polywrath. Now, Polywrath is a fairly recent development. This guy's niche is being an agility pass receiver that gets Hypnosis and Belly Drum. Now, that might seem a little janky at first. However, if Polywrath hits the Hypnosis, there's a very good chance it just wins the game, or it breaks for another setup sweeper in the back on those drum pass type teams. It's really kind of ridiculous. Just how stupid this thing can be in the right circumstance. However, it's really only good on those teams, I would say. The other thing that's helpful about it, the other trait I forgot to mention, is it has damp. People don't use Water Absorb. People use damp because one of the primary counterplays to BP type teams is to just, you just boom on the BP turn, you kill whatever comes in, right? Like, if the Zap is agility passing, you boom on the BP turn, and all of a sudden the Marowak's dead. There's nothing you can do. So, what happens is you go to your Polywrath, and 1, you got your Polywrath in, now it's at +2 speed, and you can fire off a Hypno for free. 2, the boom was negated, so it makes it so they don't want to boom as long as they see Poliwraths alive. Because if they just go to the Poliwrath, you just gave them another free turn, right? So it creates this kind of mind game that's really annoying to deal with on teams where you can't just like kill it. But especially on like phasingless offense teams like that are trying to play at a faster pace, it just 6-0s those pretty much. But yeah, it's pretty niche. This tier is like pretty unordered. I think I would say Poliwrath is definitely Poliwrath and Blayly, Dragonite, and Golduck are probably on the top of this tier. Along with another, well, no, never mind, actually. Next up, we're going to go to Misdreavus. Misdreavus is a Pokemon that was, is it here? Okay. It's real only niche in the tier, but I'm saying this because it's been notable recently, it's been used on ABRs, what am I saying? Oh yeah, it's used on a version of like ABR Superman that has 6 levitators, and it uses Misdreavus to spin block basically. Which it doesn't really do much block. It can like click Wisp and like rest and Destiny Bond, I guess, but it's definitely cool to see other ghosts besides Gengar kind of on the rise again. Dusclops has also been rising up again. I credit that to ABR as well. But yeah, it's been cool to see that recently. Next up, Omastar. This guy's very funny. He's really only good in the lead slot, but he has a lot of really cool moves that I think should be explored. If you can find a team that can support it. Thief, Thief, Hydro Pump. It gets very strong Hydro Pump. Comes off 115 base attack. It gets Ice Beam. It gets Spikes is another big one. So it's a lead that can spike on the Bliss switch in, and like it's a lead that can spike on the Bliss switch in, or you can just go to a Doug or something. But it's like it can also set up Rain for itself, which is very very punishing against teams with no Bliss. Because if it clicks Rain on like turn 1, all of a sudden Omastar is getting like 3 kills. But it's really like kind of a no Bliss fish. You can also use it to trade into something, and then you can Doug the Bliss that comes out after or something. It's a cool like offense lead, but it's hard to really. I know NCH Max was experimenting with it a while ago, but it's not really like anything I'd call like super crazy, I don't think. Okay, so we're going to go. I have a few more Pokemon in this tier. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more that I believe deserve notice, or deserve note in are of note in this tier is what I'm trying to say. After that, we'll just go up to the next tier. I know this is like a lot, but these are all Pokemon that I think are either underexplored or cool and need to be talked about more. Next up, we'll go to Jumpluff. Jumpluff is really annoying on specifically like Spike Stall. Or I guess every stall has spikes, but it's very annoying on specifically Stall as a pick into teams that don't have anything faster than it. If there's nothing faster than it, Jumpluff wins on preview. Pretty much. Encore, Leech Seed, Sleep Powder, Sub, as long as it hits Leech Seed and Sleep Powder, it just wins. There's nothing teams that are slower than it can do until it runs out of PP, basically. Like, it is unkillable for those teams. It's very fucking annoying. However, it's very susceptible to being outplayed. And it also, like, things can set up in its face. If say you sack something to sleep, you can go set up a DD-tar, and all of a sudden Jumpluff is a little less than ideal. You can of course get encored into DD, but it creates a situation where you can create a situation where you can outplay there with DD, and you can create a situation where you can outplay with DD and HP. Actually, no, you can't get encored into DD. As long as you're Jolly DD-tar, you can outspeed. So never mind. But versus like with like Adamant DD-tar can get a little annoying. But Jolly DD-tar can outspeed and break the sub with HP Bug or with Rock Slide. So yeah, that's Jumpluff. Next up, Arcanine. Cool guy. I know Eden really likes this guy. He was talking to me about Arcanine a while ago. I used it once and it's like, okay. So the idea with Arcanine is you use it to soften. You can either use it as like a utility lead to like soften up Doug, or you can use the classic like choice band lead set with E-Speed, HP Fighting, Fire Move, and I don't remember what the typical last is. Let's take a look. Iron Tail. This doesn't look right. I think maybe like Toxic or something, but yeah, generally, Arcanine it has Intimidate and E-Speed and access to HP Fighting that kills Tar. And on top of that, it has a Fire Move to kill Skarm, so that's pretty cool. It's not, like, super great, but it's very good into, like, Skarm-Tar matchups. Those are, like, where it really shines. Especially Skarm-Tar matchups with, like, no Coon. But, yeah, so Arcanine can also E-Speed a Doug to make it so you like if you have a Loom in the back or something, Mach will kill, or to make it so if your opponent is relying on Doug to live a hit, like versus a Bliss or something, Doug can no longer do that, which is pretty cool. It can kind of break for its teammates in that way. Next up, Rydon. I've seen a few people use this guy. He's pretty shit, if I'm being honest, but he's really strong. Like 130 base attack with Stab Earthquake and Stab Rock Slide is nothing to joke at, especially with access to Swords Dance. But the big things that get in this guy's way are, one, the fact that it has 5 base speed, so you need to run it on Paraspam teams, which it's still fine. It would still be fine there if Skarmory didn't also exist. Skarm will take a lot from +2 Rock Slide, but also just whirls it out for free and clicks Protect and Toxic, and is very annoying. So yeah, if you ever run into phasingless Skarm, I guess you just win, but for the most part, you need a mag as well. But yeah, if you pair Rydon with Asterachi and other Paraspreaders, it's usable. I've tried to build with it. I can't get anything to work with it. I think it's a little too shit. Slacking is another mon that I think is a little too shit. It loses to the move Protect because of Truant, which Metagross very commonly runs, Jirachi really commonly runs, Swampert really commonly runs, Skarmory really commonly runs. Tar can run it. I've used that before. It's pretty cool. Molt can also run it. Same with let's keep going. Flygon. It's everywhere, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And while 160 base attack with a Choice Band and Hyper Beam being a combo with its ability is pretty ridiculous. Hyper Beam does a shit ton of damage to everything, even resists. So it's cool, but it's not good. I would not bring it to a tournament game. It's fun to use on ladder though. Last Pokemon in this tier is gonna be Solrock. After this, we'll be moving on to my actual VR. This is just stuff I wanted to note. Solrock is useful in exactly the lead slot as a CB Boom user. It gets Baton Pass too, which is interesting, but it's a good lead that is not meta on Fizz-Off teams, basically. where you're trying to boom into the Scarm. Like, you can boom with the Solrock and then trap it with Mag. You can get rid of it. Or you can... It has access to a pretty strong with Choice Band Stab Rock Slide. And also HP Fighting for Tar and Earthquake as well. It gets, like, Overheat, too, if you're into that. Super Epic Ampharos was trying to use CM Solrock a while ago, which is a very funny set. And it does its job of chunking Pert and Scarm, but it, with CM, Overheat, HP Grass, and Explosion. But it's really not, like, anything to write home about, I would say. It's just funny. Okay. So... let's move on to the bottom tier of my VR. So we're gonna start with Sceptile. This is now, so that last tier was, that was completely unordered. That's just Pokemon I feel like are worth mentioning that don't see any use. We're gonna start with Sceptile. The thing that sets Sceptile above that tier, just barely, is the fact that it gets access to Overgrow, Leaf Blade, and it's really good at being a fast, like, Subseed user, and it also gets access to some other decent coverage moves like Hidden Power Ice, Thunder Punch. Can also run Swords Dance if you really want. But the main thing this guy is good at is it really rips apart like teams that are relying on like Pert Ments for defense. It's very hard for those teams to do anything against this guy. But unfortunately, he kind of gets destroyed by... If he doesn't run HP Ice, he gets destroyed by Ments. He gets rolled by every fire type. Besides, like, Camel. He dies to quite a bit. And he also doesn't kill anything that resists grass, really. Outside of things that are quad weak to ice. Like, Rachi... Like all of the grass resists can come in on this guy for absolutely free and just kind of do whatever they want. Especially like Breloom and Celebi. Celebi especially kind of just sits on this guy because Celebi will take not a whole lot from Leaf Blade, and Celebi will also is immune to Leech Seed. So it's his real only option is to click HP Ice. That's gonna do like 40%, not even, and Celebi just kills it back because it has no bulk. But it's interesting for what it is. I think access to Endeavor also makes it very interesting because you can sub down to a Pitaya and then start clicking Endeavor, kind of in a similar vein to like Enpert. But yeah, that's Sceptile. Umbreon is next. This is one of the non-T-Tar pursuiters of the tier. You usually see this on like hard stall, but you can also see it on specifically teams that want a pursuiter, don't want Sand, and also don't want Houndoom. So it's a very niche, but it can work in those scenarios. It has Wish, Taunts, Moonlight for recovery on its own, and then also Baton Pass is pretty cool. It also gets Charm, which it runs quite frequently to hit things like Arrow and Ments and really like make them easier to deal with. And Lax too is another good one. All of the setup guys in the tier are really annoyed by Charm. All the physical setup guys are anyway. It also has the bulk to live most like non-explosion hits too, so yeah, pretty cool. That's Umbreon. We'll go to Medicham next. Medicham has a few sets. CB is one. My favorite set though is, as you can see, it has a couple. Like the reversal set is like okay, 4 attacks is like usable. Not really. But my favorite set is Lead Medi with Selak. And so you just kind of click Bulk Up versus every lead, and then you get a kill with Rock Slide, Shadow Ball, or Brick Break. Like some teams are completely unprepared to handle it, and you get like 3. But it's a cool like Fizz-Off lead. It's legitimately like it can't get trapped. Can it? No, it can't get trapped by Doug because of how fast it is. This is too fast to get trapped by Doug. It's too slow to beat Arrow, but it's too fast to get trapped by Doug. So yeah, I mean, the only thing that really hard punishes Medi after it gets a kill is like Arrow or Jolt. Everything else just kind of dies. It's very cool, that set is, but it's of course going to be limited in that scope because it's a suicide lead, so you're just looking to click Bulk Up once and get as many kills as you can, essentially. Which, I mean, it's good at that, but that's about all it really does. CB with Baton Pass is also interesting because you can BP to a Mag on Scarm or something. Skarmory is, of course, a major major roadblock to, like, every form of the set, pretty much. It doesn't get the broken high jump kick like it does in later gens. It doesn't get, physical Fire Punch or Thunder Punch. It just kind of has to rely on fighting moves, which is... You're still going to do decent damage, but you're not going to Oko Skarm, and Skarm's going to kill you back, and then if you don't, you have to be on a team where you're overloading Skarm, basically. It's a pretty niche pick. Next up, we're going to go to Lantern. Lantern is another fairly recent development. Was really causing a storm a couple years ago when I was first getting into it. People were first getting into ADV about a year ago or so. People were really on this thing, and the reason for that is because of my good friend Super. He came up with the idea that, hey, if you need a spikes abuser and your team is really weak to things that are clicking Thunderbolt and also not HP Grass, basically, so Starmie, Ice Zap, stuff like that, Lantern's your guy. Lantern also has a very strong Hydro Pump that 2 KOs pretty much everything below it besides Bliss. Access to Ice Beam, and of course, Stab Hydro and Stab Thunder is a really cool combination. Volt Absorb is great for pivoting too. It gets moves like T-Wave, Toxic, Protect. You can run HP Grass Last if you want, or Confuse Ray. Some people run that, but the problems with Lantern, one, it has a very big Doug weakness. Like, Lantern is another one of those Pokemon that I was talking about before that just kind of flails when Doug Trio comes out. Like, there's actually nothing it can do. Lantern also, a lot of Pokemon below this, and above this too, have ways of dealing with Blissey when it switches in. Like, for example, below this, Entei can click Roar, Lapras can click Roar, and, like, even in this tier, like, Sceptile clicks Leech Seed. And stuff above it can click Leech Seed, Roar, or it can, hit it with a physical move on switch in or something like that. Lantern has none of that. Its best option is to click Toxic, which is really not what you want to be doing versus a Blissey. It's fine if you're like Lantern Doug. It's like okay, but you also need to most likely be sacking your Lantern in the process. Or you're going to be wasting, like, all your T-Bolt or Hydro Pump PP to get it in range as soft, and it's just really, like, it's not, like, ideal, basically. It's pretty owned by Bliss. The other problem with this guy is you can see it has 125 base HP. Good HP stat. The rest of his stats are all really shit. 76 special attack is, like, nothing. You need to invest, you need max attack modest, max special attack modest for this to do anything, basically. Even if you're, like, here, right? Like, 232 is just jack shit. But other than it being, like, piss weak, it has very cool coverage, a cool defensive niche, and a cool typing. So, yeah, that's Lantern. Next up is Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir is, like, one of the most underexplored Pokemon. Like, looking at the moves it gets Calm Mind, Destiny Bond, Hypnosis... Memento is a really cool one. T-Wave, Wisp, Toxic, Wish, Taunt too, with all this coverage. Not to mention all the moves that are down here that I'm not going to bother to read. Something like it's Thief. Thief is pretty cool. Imprison too could be interesting. But generally, you see this thing used as like a CMer, but the only person who really uses it is C, to my knowledge. You see this thing used as a CMer, but the ability Trace also gives it the niche of being one of 2 reverse Doug Trappers in all of ADV. The other one is Porygon 2, who I'll get to later on in the video. But yeah, this with some bulk invest in a Salac Berry can turn the tables on Doug, get a CM, or it can do something like Weather Clear. Like, it can, like, Weather Clear with, like, you can kill the Doug with Ice Punch, click Rain Dance, and then click Memento, and all of a sudden, boom, you bring in, like, a Suicune or a Kingdra, and, like, oh, shit. All of a sudden, your opponent has to switch into crazy water moves. And it's just, like, it can enable some really interesting stuff, but it's really, it's not a Pokemon that's easy to rank, really. It's something that I think could be far better than it is right now. But yeah, that's Gardevoir. Next up, Scissor. Scissor, I talked about it a little bit earlier. It has a niche as a physical, like, reversal sweeper that's immune to sand, but it also has a niche as being one of the best Pokemon to click SD and Baton Pass, which is pretty cool. The main problem is it gets jack shit for attacking moves, so you can't really click SD on its own. Because its best Steel Stab is Steel Wing, and its best Bug Stab is HP Bug. So there's really not, like, its best attacking move is Reversal. I'll say that. It's kind of has this awkward thing where you need to run Silver Wind unless you want to lose to Mence. Like, you need to run Silver Wind if you don't want to lose to Mence, I mean, because then you have access to HP Rock. But then you don't have a move slot for, like, Agility, or you don't have a move slot for something to hit, like, you don't have a move slot for Baton Pass, and it just gets really weird. But I think generally the best Scizor set is SD or Agility Endure. And then either Agility or SD Endure. And then Reversal HP Bug. And the berry is either Lychee or Select, whichever one you didn't use your setup move for. I think generally Endure Lychee is a little better with Agility because you can actually outspeed Arrow then. But Endure Salak with SD also works because it nets you some kills on things like Skarmory and better damage on like Asterachi, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's Scissor. Speaking of Baton Pass, next up we have Marowak. Marowak is a Pokemon that is really only useful. Where is it? Is it up here? Yeah, it is. Okay. Marowak is really only useful on Baton Pass and rarely on Paraspam. I've seen it there a couple times. It is, well, the main example of it on Paraspam is that one Star Master sample team with like Hariyama and like Celebi Jirachi, Starmie, and then I think it's Salamence in Marowak, something like that. But yeah, generally this guy will be clicking Swords Dance after having an Agility pass to it or some Speed Boosts passed to it from Ninjask. That is its role in ADV. It is capable of checking DDTAR with these stats and its typing, which is cool, but generally you're gonna use it to clean after you kill their Skarm. This thing can really do nothing to Skarm, is its other problem. You can run like Focus Punch, I guess, but it's like you're usually taking a Toxic in return, or you're just getting Drill Pecked and nothing's happening. And so Marowak just loses the 1v1 very, very hard to Skarmory. There's like not much it can do. Or it can like SD, but then Skarmory can just like roar. Like it's like very Skarmory favored. That's why you usually see Marowak with a mag. Like on BP teams, there's almost always a mag for that reason, basically. Skarm is also very disruptive to BP teams in general. So yeah, all right. Next up, one of my personal favorite guys, Machamp. Now, Machamp is really interesting and has really good traits, but he's so hard to fit. The reason why Machamp is so good is because he's a pretty bulky fight. Why did it do that? Pretty bulky fighting type, right? Like 90, 80, 85 is like pretty respectable for a fighting type in ADV. It has Guts too, which means it can turn Gengar, which is normally a check, it can turn it completely on its head. Gengar, a lot of teams that are relying on Gengar as their fighting type check get trolled by Guts fighting types. Namely, well, the two are Machamp, and there's another guy who we'll talk about a lot later, who's much better than Machamp and does this job just as well. But the main thing that holds Machamp back, it gets all the coverage of other fighting types like Rock Slide. It runs like HP Ghost and stuff. But the main thing that holds it back is it's not a fighting type that has another good move really besides Cross Chop, unless you want to run Brick Break. But Brick Break really doesn't do any damage. Even coming off 130, you really notice the power drop from Cross Chop. the high crit rate is good, but the fact that you're missing 20% of the time means Machamp just kind of doesn't do anything 20% of the time. However, Machamp still remains like one of the best Bliss punishes in the whole game because it can switch into any move Blissey throws at it basically, and unless it freezes it with Ice Beam, Machamp is forcing Blissey out and likely either getting a kill or putting a lot of pressure on that team. So it's a really good pick into like Skarbliss TSS type builds, as fighting types tend to be. Next up, after Machamp, we're gonna go to Armaldo. Now, this guy really has... this guy should probably be lower now that I'm thinking about it, but whatever. We'll leave it here. So, Armaldo has a very interesting niche on certain... like, a couple of very specific stall teams, but it's very, 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 very good at that. It is the best Snorlax answer in the entire game, bar none. The reason why that's so important is because a lot of the teams that it's used as a Snorlax answer on are teams that lose 6-0 to Last Mon Curselax. Now, does it set on here? It's not on here. Wow. Okay, so, but the set is, here, I'll show you. It is Harden, Rest, Knock Off, and I think Rock Slide was the last or something like that. But these are the 3 important moves. So what happens is, you knock off the Lax's lefties, you click Harden as it clicks Curse, and because of Battle Armor, it can never crit you. So it has no way of getting through you. So you're basically, you're watching the Lax as it eventually booms, or like it either booms into you eventually and you take no damage, or it runs out of PP eventually and there's nothing you can do. The fact that Lax has Rest doesn't matter because you also have Rest, and you have Harden, which has 64 PP, I think. 48, yeah, it's close enough. Which is enough to stall out literally anything that Lax can do, basically. Like, Lax will never beat Armaldo in PP, which is what's so cool about this set. It gets access to Rapid Spin too, which is interesting. But the set that people have been, that I've seen other people try, which is interesting, with this attack stat, you're like, okay, maybe it can do something like this, right? Or maybe it can do something like SD. And it does get access to a couple cool moves for that. It gets Rock Slide, or Rock Blast, which can potentially be higher BP than Rock Slide. It also gets, Bug Rock is a really interesting stab type because you can hit like a lot of physical and special checks for very good damage. The reason why Bug is so interesting in particular as a stab is because Claydol is no longer a good answer to you at all. The reason why we don't see like Armaldo more is because it has issues with getting revenge killed because it's really slow. And if you're running speed invest, like look at this. To get up to like 180, you need to run almost max speed, which means you're running almost no bulk. Or you're dropping Adamant for Jolly, which is really not like that's not a whole lot, right? So you need to be Adamant, which is 349, which is okay. Plus 2 that gets you to like 720 something, but the problem is you're still at 180 speed, right? So it's really only useful as like a breaker. But at that point, you want something with more immediate power, right? Because the immediate power of this is not strong. Like, Blissey is coming into this and healing up all day. So is Skarm. So is, like, everything. And the problem is it's not really that good at that role. So it's really only... its best use where it shines the most is this Lax Check set. But I think it's Seismic Toss that uses last. It might be Seismic Toss. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's this Lax Check set. Don't use these EVs. Use the EVs. I think it was on a Dice team. Use Dice as EVs. I don't know what they are off the top of my head. But yeah, so that's where this guy's good. Next up we'll go to Ninjask. Ninjask is a very polarizing Pokemon. As you can imagine, looking at these stats and this ability, it's really only useful on Baton Pass archetypes. There are a few people who've tried to use like back Ninjask, and it's like usable. Not my favorite by any means. I don't think it's very good. Back Ninjask is not very. It can be surprising to a few teams, like off a Duck Punish, especially. It can be very threatening, but I don't think it's like I don't think it's like all that good because it needs very specific what did I just say? I don't think I said the word specific correctly, but it needs very specific scenarios to actually do anything, basically. But yeah, on the BP archetypes, I think it's very, of course, it's like the centerpiece of the BP archetype, so it has to be somewhere, like, pretty high on the list. But BP, the way it is right now, is much worse than any form has ever been in, basically. With no soundproof, it basically folds to any phasing whatsoever. And Explosion is also really shit for it. There's a couple techs you can run, like Polywrath and, like, you can, like, Polywrath and you can, like, Mag Scarm and stuff, but it's still, like, the majority of teams are gonna come packing a phaser, and if it's, like, Roar Pert, like, what do you do? You know? But anyway, that's Ninjask. BP's still, like, usable, it's just not great. Next up, Dusclops. The reason why this guy isn't in the bottom tier is because of how much I've seen people talking about it recently, mostly. I feel like it deserves a higher spot just for right now. It'll definitely go back down. But yeah, so what Dusclops is really good at is it is the best spin blocker in the tier by a wide margin. Gengar and Misdreavus, frankly, don't even really come close to the bulk that Dusclops can offer. The drawback is it does really jack shit in return, and versus any team that can keep spikes up versus you, it really gets worn down really quickly. It does run rest a lot of the time, but against faster paced teams, resting is oftentimes a really big downgrade, or a really big downside, because you're essentially saying, hey, my spin blocker will be a sitting duck for 2 turns, come kill it. So yeah. It does get moves like Wisp, and it gets, like, Stab Shadow Ball, which is good into all spinners. That's part of the reason why it's so good at spin blocking, is because it beats pretty much every spinner that isn't, like, Donphan, and nobody uses Donphan anyway. Like, the big ones are Fori, which it super owns, Doll, which it also super owns, and Starmie, which can really only para it back. And it's, like, none of those are doing well into this at all. Next up is, this guy should probably be lower, but I think he's cool, so fuck it, we'll leave him here. This tier's, like, very roughly ordered anyway. Reggie Rock. This is the Coltior Classic. Reggie Rock kind of does what Solrock does, but, like, much better in every way. And it can also run a couple other more fringe sets compared to its, like, lead boom set. Reggie Rock is a lead that does not resist CP meta mash that can live. And so what you do is you run, like, bulk for it, and you can counter the CP meta, and the CP meta just dies. Like, huge threat to offense teams, like, out of the way. Done. And then it can boom on whatever comes in next. Or, and I think this set is pretty cool, it can also click Thunder Wave, which is not something I see people use, like, often, but it's still very cool. I do think the thing is, you don't want to overload Reggie Rock too much. Like, you really can't ask it to do more than counter one thing and click Explosion. But it's very, very, very good at doing that, basically. Usually you see it used with Mag, in a similar vein to Solrock, but it's, it doesn't have to be. It's also very good as a backup, like, physicals check, because there's no physical in the tier that's beating it, really. Hardly any physicals in the tier can, none of them can OHKO it, and hardly any can, like, even 2-hit KO. It's like, CB Ments, and, like, the really strong CBers can 2-hit KO. Other than that, it's, like, none of them. Of course, you basically require things like Bliss to switch into special attackers, but, because this thing can't take any special attack for shit, really, besides, like, fire moves, but just switch in your Bliss anyway. But, yeah, this thing is okay. It would be a little better if it could click Stealth Rock in this gen, but whatever. Not like we can ask for that much. Stealth Rock would break the shit out of this tier anyway. The last Pokemon in my very fringe tier is, someone who I wanted to put higher, but I'm not going to do it yet for the sake of, I know the bottom 2 tiers are a little, like, the bottom 2 tiers are kind of, like, where things belong in there. I could see, you could tell me any of the Pokemon in the bottom 2 tiers could be in either tier, and I'd probably be like, yeah, sure, whatever. This is one guy, the only guy in these 2 tiers who I could see being moved out of these 2 tiers. Besides, like, maybe Machamp, or, like, maybe Dusclops. I guess Ninjask, too, if you're really about that. But, this guy is Ursaring. Now, about a month ago, or so, me and C were in a call. And C was just kind of calcing Ursaring stuff. And we discovered that this guy might be one of the best Agilipass recipients in the tier. He also has a 6-0 matchup into pretty much any kind of fat team. Like, even with a Scarm, Scarm still... If it gets to click SD, Scarm is taking a shit ton of damage. And you either have a Mag or you have other things that are overwhelming Scarm with it anyway. So the Scarm chip is very important. It also does like 85 to Pert. It kills Blissey, kills Meta with EQ, kills Tar with EQ at +2. Like, this guy is really fucking strong. It also has the very cool aspect of having Guts. So you can switch it in on a Wisp and all of a sudden... the Gengar is forced to boom, or it dies. And then the Scarm comes in on Rock Slide and takes like 30, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, it's time to get it poppin'. But yeah, this guy is really, really, really cool. Like, at +2, there is hardly anything in the metagame that doesn't get to it KO'd. Besides, like, Skarmory, I guess? And that's about it. Like, it's very strong. However, it's really hard to justify on teams that aren't, like, passing agilities to it. On teams where you're passing an agility to it, this guy is so good. On other more traditional, like, mag-type teams where you're trying to use this as, like, a fizz-off, like, breaker, he's, like, okay, but you can't really expect him to get more than 1 kill a game, basically. I think on specifically, like, mag fizz-off, he can do a lot, though, especially into TSS-type stuff. But yeah, so that is the end of my very fringe tier. As I've said before, these two tiers are kind of just like where I put all the Pokemon that are like cool, but not really like super duper viable. We're going to be going up a tier now, and this is where you start to get to things that are seen a little more. Starting with Camerupt. Now Camerupt, you could argue belongs in lower tiers. The reason why I think it doesn't is because it can do more than you think it can. It has the ability to, like, Fire Ground, Magma Armor, so it can't be frozen. Great check to Sub Amrachi for that reason. Fire Ground is a really interesting stab typing. It gets access to Rock Slide, Explosion, Toxic, all sorts of really cool moves. Now, the things that hold it back are obviously its speed tier. It's like base 30 speed. It's really shit. You have to invest a lot to be even faster than Scarm, which is what I think you should do on Camel. I think it's great if it's faster than Min Scarm. Camel is really, really good at soft checking like Zap and Gengar and firing off attacks or clicking Explosion. It's really, really good at that. Which is why on Fizz-Off, those Gengar is a mon that can really annoy Fizz-Off. Camel helps to alleviate that weakness a little bit. It's very, very good on those teams. I think it can really shine on teams like where it's paired with a Lax and it doesn't have to deal with switching into like Hydro Pump. It also really needs like if your opponent has a Doug, like your Camel is just gonna die. Like, if your opponent has a Doug and you get a click wrong with Camel, like if your opponent goes to say like Scarm on Earthquake, they can just bring in Doug on Fire Blast and Doug lives and then you just die. but they can also like sack a mon that's not very important and just bring in Doug on Camel, and all of a sudden you've lost one of your booms, which is important for the later game. You've lost like one of your primary special checks, all that stuff. But it's like a very cool Pokemon. It's hard to fit, but I think it deserves more usage than it gets. It did see use last SPL. I believe ABR used it. Might also have been somebody else, I'm not sure. But next up, Blaziken. This is a guy I really didn't get sold on until recently, but specifically in the lead slot is where you want to use Blaziken. I think this is his best set right now. Fire Blast and HP. Now, the reason why I think this is because I tend to think Pokemon are better if you play into their strengths rather than trying to use sets to shore up their weaknesses, especially if they're like kind of a bad Pokemon like Blaziken, or lower on the VR, I should say. Not necessarily bad, but the reason why I say this is because the classic like Superman team really gets entirely 6-0'd by this. Like the classic Tar, Flagon, Bliss, Tar, Gon, Bliss, Molt, Zap, and then Skarm. That classic like ABR Superman team can do absolutely nothing about this. You run it in like the 250s, so it's faster than Rest Zap and then Flagon, and all of a sudden, boom, like you super destroy. The only way that you really get punished for this is if they have an arrow. And not a whole lot of Superman teams do. Some do, but not a whole lot. Now what you might be thinking looking at this is, oh, doesn't Rest Zap switch in? Well, here's the thing. Rest Zap is a Pokemon that, while very good into Blaziken and a decent switch into it, yes, its HP is very easy to manipulate into a range where you can 2-hit KO with Fire Blast. So the big thing that you can do is if you focus punch it on switch in, if Blaziken's at full health, you live T-Bolt, and all of a sudden it's dead to 2 Fire Blasts. It has to rest after the first one to live. And if you know that, you can go to your other Pokemon on your team and generate a whole lot of momentum. Like T-Tar in particular can get a whole lot of momentum off that. And things like things that both force Rest Zap out and also can punish like a switch into like Flagon or something are super important. You can also just double back. Like this thing is really it's like a great way of generating momentum against those teams. It's also just good into like Skarmbliss stuff generally, like, but the main it kind of struggles a little more there because the focus and ice move slots are like, they can also be grass and like Thunder Punch or like maybe sub. And the move that you don't run is the move you're going to be missing against those teams. Like, once they figure out that your Blaziken doesn't have HP grass, they'll be switching in their Pert like all day. And Sky like 3-hit KOs, or maybe not even. Sky does a decent bit of chip, but it's to the point where like Pert is a very good short-term answer. And it can also just kind of recover on Blaziken. Like, it comes in, clicks tech, switches out, and it's like, okay, you didn't really do any damage to it then. But the other thing that this is really annoyed by is Doug. Blaziken can't really do anything about Doug, just generally. Like, Doug comes in, it dies. It's another one of those Pokemon that is really held back by Doug. It also has a tough time into bulky waters. And even running grass or T-Punch does not help. Neither of those do any damage to Milo or Suicune. Those are the main two. Milo, Suicune, Vaporeon. But Vaporeon to a lesser extent because it takes a lot of damage from your physical fighting moves. But yeah, Milo and Suicune are the two I'm for with this set. Because those two are incredibly hard to kill for Blaziken teams for the most part unless you're booming on them. And Blaziken's just kind of a dead slot into those two. If you have spikes up, it can be okay. If you click Sky, you can force situations where, oh, if you have like 3 spikes and you click Sky, like, oh shit, it was at 85, all of a sudden it dies to 2 skies. You can set up stuff like that, but it's really like, it requires some help to get through those. Not a bad Pokemon by any means, though. I think it's very cool. Should probably be higher, but I'm really just not fully convinced yet. Next up, Regis. This guy really fell out of favor in the last few years. He used to be, like, OU and, like, very good, but I think the problem with him is he's very slow, and he kind of just lets Metagross in for free. Like, even, like, some people run HP Fire, that doesn't even do any damage, really. Again, Stab Ice Beam, great. Like, Stab Ice Beam is awesome, but when your other coverage move is non-stab Thunderbolt, and other than that, you're clicking Explosion, which doesn't kill anything, really, so you basically require Doug, it's really not that great. The reason why it's here, though, is because against a lot of more specially oriented teams, if you have, like, a Spinner, and they don't have, like, a great switch into Ice Beam, or they just have things that don't have recovery, really, Regis is really excellent versus those teams, because it can kind of just, especially if there's no sand, Regis can kind of just come in repeatedly and, like, sponge hits from Zap and deal out strong-ass Ice Beams or click Thunder Wave and even explode later. Like, it's very, very serviceable against those teams. I'd also like to shout out the lead Choice Band set that Roro came up with. That is a very, very cool set that can snipe Tyranitar and make it so you can Weather Cleave for stuff later, which is pretty cool. Other than that, though, I think it's down here for a reason, and I think I can only see it going lower from here for me. Blaziken, I think, will go up. Next up is Houndoom. Houndoom is it's the other non-tar pursuiter. I guess it sounds like meta, but it's like, it's very good at what it does because it can actually, like, Okogar with Pursuit, I'm pretty sure. I don't actually know that. Let's find out. Does the analysis say if it can Okogar with Pursuit? Oh yeah. So the other thing. Okay, it doesn't say that, but the things that Houndoom does are, one, it has Early Bird, which makes it a decent switch into Sleep. You don't have many, like, actively good switch into Sleep in the tier. This is probably one of the few. Two. Houndoom is a pursuiter that has a decent speed tier for it, and can also actually, like, threaten to Oko Gengar instead of just kind of, like, sitting in front of it and not killing it, so Gengar gets a free switch out, like versus Tar. Well, specifically, especially bulky Gengar gets a free switch out versus Tar. But yeah, and then Houndoom also has access to Beat Up, which is pretty cool versus Blissey. It's not, like, the most ideal thing. You don't want to be relying on it, but it's cool. It also gets Roar, which you can use to deal with Blissey. But I think that one of its more interesting traits that kind of gets overlooked is the fact that if you choose to run Flash Fire instead, all of a sudden Houndoom sits on Super Rachi, it sits on Super Bee, it sits on Moltres, it can sit on Fighting Lizard, and, like, all of a sudden you look at all those and it's like, shit, like, this thing actually can have some defensive utility. Because its Fire Blasts are going to be doing a lot of damage back to all of those, basically, and even to Moltres, like, Crunch does a lot. Now, of course it's not that consistent at that, with 75-80 being weak to spikes, and generally, like, not appreciating switching into even resisted attacks. It's not really, like, the ideal thing to be doing that with, but it's something you can do with it. You don't want to be relying on it, though. Alright, so that's Houndoom. Houndoom is pretty interesting. I feel like a lot of the time it just can't quite compress everything it wants to, though. Next up, Porygon 2. This is the other reverse Doug Trapper of the tier. Another Pokemon that's kind of fallen off recently, along with Regis. I know there's still a few P2 lovers, but generally Porygon 2 is not a not a super, like, highly regarded Pokemon right now. Mostly because the teams that it fits on, it has a solid niche in that it is a very, very good, like, universal Mence answer. Like, pretty much every set gets walled by this. It has Recover, it has access to Thunder Wave, all sorts of cool tricks with Trace, and then it can tech its bulk for, like, you can run HP Fighting for Tar, you can tech its bulk and special attacks so that it actually can, like, kill Doug or etc. But the other, or Oko Doug, I mean, it's either that or you're 2-KOing it, but the thing with P2 is the teams that it fits on, the things that it enables are often a lot faster paced than P2 itself. So it kind of just ends up being a momentum sink that lets your opponent back into the game. Which, a lot of the time, is, like, not, like, it's far less, sorry, I just sat up in my chair. It's far less useful than you think it is, given everything I just told you, because a lot of the time it can kind of get taken advantage of by an opponent who's looking to get back in the game versus those teams. Like, they can aggressively double something in that can set up and force, like a Heracross, for example. They can set up and force out P2, or they like, P2 gets forced out by Heros, and it's just stuff like that, where it's also very susceptible to getting chipped. It's also still Spike's weak. Like, all that stuff, basically. It's a very cool Pokemon, but it's really not, like, that good. It's definitely, like, still has a niche, like, a very solid niche, and it's interesting. It's just not the kind of Pokemon I think is very, like, valid in this metagame. Stelix is the next guy. I know some people would have Stelix way higher than this, and I can see why, but my main problem with Stelix is, look at this attack step. And also look at this move pool. What, like, okay, I understand that its rolls are, like, it's a really good physical check and it can switch into Zap, like, pretty easily, but God, what are you doing back to, like, most of the metagame? Like, the stuff that isn't weak to EQ is taking 3 damage. What do you do to Celebi forces you to boom, Starmie forces you to boom, Suicune forces you to boom, Zapdos forces you to boom, despite the fact that you're supposed to answer it. Like, all the electrics do, really, besides, like, Jolteon. I don't even think your EQ kills Raikou. Like, it might, but, like, it's just not. It probably does, actually. I should not overestimate Raikou like that, but, Stelix is just, like, it's just not my kind of Pokemon. I understand that it's very, very good at what it does. And that being, like, if you don't need it to do damage, it's great. Like, it's just fine. But if you need it to do anything offensively, it's really, like, it's just kind of a momentum sink, honestly. Explosion is very useful for it, though, I will say that. And also, like, Protox is something that I think is pretty good on Stelix. Same with Rest. Restlix is also pretty good. Restlix, like, never dies. But the thing with Restlix is you get taken advantage of by every physical setup guy in the game and every special setup guy in the game. And it's just like, man, like, there's not really, I just can't think of a reason why I'd ever use this over Proto Meta, really. The other thing, too, is it requires Mag because, or it doesn't require, but it, like, it's, like, very heavily in need of a Mag. Because, what is it doing to Skarm? You have to flinch it with Rock Slide? Is that the plan? Like, it has no moves. Like, look at this. You can, like, Sunny Day HP Fire, I guess, or you can Explode and do 40%. Like, neither of those are really great options, but it's still very usable. It's just not my kind of Pokemon, really. That's why it's so low. After all, VRs are supposed to be, like, your opinion. Ludicolo is next. I think Ludicolo is, of the 2 Rain Abusers in the tier, I think Ludicolo is definitely worse. I think, though, Ludicolo does have its niche over Kingdra is Leech Seed, which is useful. Like, it's legitimately a useful click into Blissey that can allow it to generate some momentum off it. But it's really not, like, it still is blanking into Blissey. It's still blanking into like, some other stuff. And the other thing that supposedly helps is it has grass stab, which is supposedly helpful for bulky waters, but like Milo and Kun are still taking like hardly anything anyway, really. They can just kind of shrug it off. And they'll shrug it off, they'll click CM on you, they'll stall your rain turns, or in Milo's case, they'll just click recover for 25 years while you're getting toxic down. It's really not like super great. But I will say, I think the non-rain abuser, I think the just like the specially defensive set with Leech Seed is pretty hard to kill. I think that is kind of an underexplored set. I think that's pretty cool. I'm a fan of that set personally. But yeah, I think I would like to see a little more development with Ludicolo stuff. I think it's fine, but I think you'd rather be weather clearing for Kingdra. Next up, we're going to go to actually I fucked up. I meant to put Donphan a lot lower. Whoops. So imagine Donphan's like around where like Camel is. Or maybe even a tier below, honestly. I don't know why he was up here. Complete oversight on my part. My bad. So okay, I'll quickly talk about Donphan, but just know that on the spreadsheet and on the image in the description, he's gonna be around like where Dusclops is, or where like, honestly, more like where Gardevoir is. Yeah, he's going to be. I don't know why he was up here. I just forgot to move him. That's my fault. But Donphan is a cool spinner that checks DD-tar and has a very, very strong Earthquake, but blanks into Scarm, blanks into Gar, blanks into just about everything you would think it would blank into, and can't really do anything to circumvent those. So it really needs both Pursuit and Mag, which is not ideal when you're looking to be like a defensive support piece that you need to support. It's really not like ideal. But anyway, that's Donphan. He was supposed to be a lot lower, but we're okay. Now back to the actual list. Wheezing is next. This guy's a really good blanket fighting check and is really good at booming on waters and gets a lot of cool moves. The problem with this guy again is he doesn't really do damage outside of clicking Explosion. He gets a lot of like super cool moves, but he's like, if you're using Wheezing, it's because you basically want like a Spikes immune fighting check that can potentially blow up on something after the fighting type is dead. But yeah, Wheezing's really good at spreading burns and stuff like that, just like it is in later gens. I think physical Sludge Bomb is pretty interesting for it as well, given its slightly higher physical attack. But physical HP fighting is also pretty cool with 70 power. That allows it to actually deal with Tyranitar. But yeah, its physical bulk is just as good as you'd expect. Its special bulk leaves a lot to be desired, though. So that's Wheezing. Next up, this might be a little low to some of you. We'll have Hariyama. Hariyama is an interesting Pokemon. It's a fighting type that sees used mostly on bulkier builds, like stall builds, because of its access to knockoff. Offensive Hariyama is still good, but it's not really as good as the other fighting types. I think the defensive sets are much, much better. That being said, the reason why it's so low is because I think it's very clunky to use a lot of the time. And also because the sets that it does have defensively are sets that get taken advantage of by quite a bit. Pretty much anything with the move Psychic can come in on it. But it is notable. It does have a very strong stab focus punch. It has knockoff, which is super annoying for a lot of teams. It clicks Rest and Whirlwind too sometimes. It can also click Bulk Up on very rare occasions, and all of those are pretty valid. Hariyama it's like okay. It's not my favorite. Finally, we'll round out my C rank. Now after this is where the list really starts to get going. We'll round out my C rank with Raikou. Raikou is a Pokemon who I used to not be super high on. It would have been much lower on this list, but recently I've had a realization, and that is that the lead Subtoxic T-Bolt HP Ice set is really fucking good. That set gets an absurd amount of value, like way more than it should. That set is so crazy. Sub CM is like okay. I think the CM-Ku sets are only okay. I think that set is its best set by a mile, and I think more people need to use it. I've been trying to build more stuff with it. There's a set, I wanna make it work with a Kingdra last on that team, but it's a work in progress. But it is something that I'm going to be using in tournament very soon, I would say. It's such a cool set. I love it so much. Okay, so next up, we'll go to B- rank. There's only 4 Pokemon in this rank for me before we get going. The first Pokemon and the lowest Pokemon in this rank is Milotic. This is where Pokemon start to get like very good, I would say. Like this is like where Pokemon start to become very useful. It's the centerpiece of a lot of defensive teams, which is fine. Obviously, it's quite useful in those roles. But it also kind of has these issues basically. It has the issue of it's really vulnerable to getting crit, which I know sounds a little stupid, but that's just how it is with Milo. It's incredibly vulnerable to getting crit for one. It also doesn't really do that much damage, so Skarm can like trade HP for a spike very easily. And the fact that it's unkillable is only true until something starts setting up in its face and it doesn't have A's or something like that, you know. There's a lot that can go wrong in practice for Milo, basically. It's one of the most hacks-prone Pokemon in the whole game. And that's just like kind of how it is with this guy. If you're loading up Milo, you're just accepting that fact. But for what it is, Milo's still very good. I think a really underexplored aspect of Milo that I've tried to build with is like the offensive sets that run some speed invest. I think like Pump, Ice Beam, Hypnosis, Recover is a really cool. It's like Offcoon, but for teams that don't need an Offcoon, if that makes sense. It's like Offcoon, but for teams that want their Offcoon to live forever instead of being able to CM in people's faces, which I think is pretty valid on more like mid and slower paced offenses. I think it could work. I'm still working that one out. It's something I do want to try though. All right, next up we have Jinx. Jinx is very cool. It's one of the best HO leads in the tier. Actually 2 more very good HO leads will be following this, but Jinx I think 75% of the time, which is lovely because it's accuracy, it is pretty incredible. I think it also has great synergy with Doug and other special attackers in the back, and with stuff that requires weather clearing. Because Jinx just creates these very easy lines on turn 1. These very disruptive lines as well that can be very hard for some teams to come back from. The main thing to be worried about with Jinx is if you miss Lovely Kiss versus meta, you just lose a lot of the time. Or if you run into Lumtar, I mean, versus Tar a lot of the time you should just Ice Beam anyway and go to your Doug, so that's fine. But versus if you run into like a random Lumberry lead, like Jinx kind of just folds. But the cool thing about Jinx is on top of having Lovely Kiss and access to Strong Stab Ice Beam, you can also run like CM Taunt, CM HP Fire, or Sub CM, and all 3 of those are like pretty valid and can allow it to get multiple kills as well as a sleep in the early game, which is cool. And I've seen some people experiment with Perish Song as well, which is interesting, kind of for the same reason that it was interesting on Lapras, but it's like it still remains to be seen just how good it is. There's one Pokemon above this that's a very, very good Perish Song user, and I'll mention that when it comes to it, but not very, very good, but it's like seen use on that Pokemon, and it's been good on that Pokemon. I haven't really seen it on Jinx that much. Next up, we have a pretty underrated and versatile Pokemon in Vaporeon. Vaporeon has essentially 2 functions. One of them is the bulky set, where you're like passing wishes. You click like, it's like Surf, Toxic, Wish, Baton Pass, some shit like that, maybe Protect. That's used on more fat stuff, as it has water absorb, so it's able to switch into stuff like Offcoon and like Swampert and stuff pretty easily, and also Hard Walls Kingdra, which is pretty interesting, and other endgamers like that. I think the more, it also has a, well, the other more niche function is as, on full pass it was used as an acid armor user, which is interesting. But the more interesting Vaporeon to me is the offensive sub-pass one that gets used in lead slot a lot. Now, the reason why this is so interesting, it can either run Leftovers or Salak Berry, both of which are very good, depending on the pace of your team. The reason why it's so interesting is because it can generate momentum very easily off both Blissey, because it has 404 subs, and off Suicune, because it comes in on Suicune, it subs, and all of a sudden, your Suicune that did not lose to Zapdos before because it was very fat and you already had +1, all of a sudden loses to Zapdos, or it all of a sudden gets boomed on by something that shouldn't be booming on it because it got a sub passed. Or all of a sudden, you go to, like, they go to a Doug, and all of a sudden the Doug forces to rest, or the Doug is able to kill you from a higher percent range than you should be able to. It also has this kind of thing where if they have a Coon and you switch in Vap on Surf, and they go to, say, like a Zapdos or something, you click sub, and all of a sudden, free Ice Beam. That's a huge chip on Zapdos for something like, pretty much any, like, special endgamer. That's huge. Like Starmie or like Moltres, like they all appreciate chip on Zap, because none of those guys can Oko Zap. But yeah, Vaporeon is it's a really interesting Pokemon that I used to use more, and I think I need to like find ways to use it again, 'cause it's very good at what it does. It has a very, very strong Hydro Pump too. 110 special attack with 120 base power Hydro Pump that's a lot of damage. Okay, and the last Pokemon in this tier is a pretty cool one. It is Smeargle. Now, what Smeargle does is, it's pretty basic. It clicks Spore, and it sets spikes. Does it learn moves? Okay, I see. I didn't know if it learned other moves by level up or if it was just Sketch. I guess it's just Sketch. So Smeargle clicks Spore, clicks spikes, and then the last move can be any combination of, like, Whirlwind, Will-O-Wisp. I usually like to run Explosion, but like Whirlwind, Will-O-Wisp, Explosion, all that stuff. You can do pretty much any kind of cheese you want with this guy. He's very, very good at passing, like Dragon Dance is something that we've seen recently. But he's a very versatile guy, that is one of the most, it's a very consistent Pokemon at getting one spike and a sleep, which is, on the teams that you run it on, oftentimes enough. As long as you can keep the spike up for the whole game, which is usually only going to last around 15 turns with Smeargle teams, you can usually find very easy win paths with that, and it's really enabling of those types of very fast offense teams. Cowboy Dan is a very classic, HO team with a Vaporeon lead and a Smeargle that's EV'd to live a Zap T-Bolt. So the turn 1 play is versus everything else you sub, but for Zap you hard Smeargle and you put it to sleep and you get all your spikes going. It's very cool. But yeah, that is Smeargle. There's a lot more I could talk about with this guy, but he's that's maybe a subject for another time. This next tier that we're talking about has it has 9 Pokemon in it. This is my B rank. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna move some of these up to B+. Whatever. I'll do like this. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so this is my. This is my B rank. So we're going to start with a Pokemon that I think is it's much higher rated by a lot of people in Flygon. This is one of my, I know this is a pretty common take by a lot of people, but I just don't think Flygon is very good. Its bulk leaves so much to be desired. Its attack stats are not great either. It has a few good sets. It has like CBgon is okay. It really needs Mag though. The best set is defensive Flygon, which is used on the Superman builds. Protect, Toxic, Rock Slide, and Earthquake. It's a very solid set. It's very hard to break for quite a few teams. It's one of the sturdiest physical. It's a very sturdy, like, rock check. But it's also very exploitable by most special attackers, and it's really, like, it can't really do much damage back to anything. Like, its Earthquake doesn't even Oko Jolly BB-Tar, I'm pretty sure. The other thing with Flareon is the more offensive sets, like the sub sets and the sub and the CB sets, I find very hard to fit just about anywhere. There's a few teams, like, Flareon can fit alongside, like, Cloy pretty well, I find, but other than that, it's, it has the problem of not doing any damage, but it also, like, isn't bulky enough to take any hits either, so Defcon, I think, is just better, but yeah, besides it's that niche on Superman teams, I think Defcon is, like, Defcon is not the one, I don't think. Next up, this is probably my hottest take on the whole list. And it's because I really, really think this guy is in need of a lot of help. And, you know, he probably deserves to be up a few spots from here. But, this is another super hot take that I have. But not the hottest take. The hottest take is coming up in a few spots, I think. Kingdra. Now, what really pushed this over the edge for me, before I was like, yeah, Kingdra's, like, okay. Because, you know, lefties or lum, you have to pick, but it's like, okay. What really pushed this over the edge for me was when I was put onto Pitaya Berry Kingdra recently. Go explore in the calc with this. This is ridiculous. It does so much damage with Pitaya. It turns matchups that were losing before. This thing Oko's Death Pert with Hydro Pump, like, in the rain. Like, how many special attackers can Oko Pert, you know? Besides, like, stab grass moves, it does not die. Like, it's a very impressive, it has incredibly impressive damage output, but Pitaya lets it beat basically everything that isn't Bliss. Bliss is still a problem for it, which is why you still run Kingdra alongside Doug and other ways to beat Blissey, but it's definitely still, like this is what put this over the edge for me. I think Kingdra is one of the best endgamers in the tier. I thought it was that already, and this just made it even better for me. Next up, Cloyster. It's a Pokemon that I don't really see much reason to use, really. Outside of, there's a couple, like, more offensive teams can use it because it's, like, faster spikes plus boom plus damage on Scarm plus can't be trapped by Mag is, like, pretty useful. But I just find that on a lot of teams, the electric weakness that it has it's way worse than Scarm's electric weakness. It's just, like, untenable a lot of the time. Like, I find that I'd much rather just have, like, pretty much any other spiker. Though I will say, I think Salak Cloy is a potentially very cool set at lead. It does kind of a similar thing to, like, a Blayly or, like, a Smeargle. But I think the fact that it has that much natural physical bulk is pretty interesting. I think you can definitely play around with some Salak ranges with that. Sorry, it's like 12:30 a.m. I'm very tired. I had to work all day today. But yeah, I think that's potentially interesting. But for the most part, Cloyster tends to fit alongside, like, Jolt on very fast, like, dual elect type teams. But I think on teams where you want more of an offensive presence from your spiker, but I think on those teams, like, you'd also much rather just have a Scarm a lot of time. Next up, this guy's gonna be really low, but Breloom. I initially had Breloom, like, below Flygon. I do not think Breloom is good in the slightest. I appreciate the niche that it does have of being the only viable Mach Punch user. There are other Mach Punch users, like, I think Hitmonlee gets it or something, and, like, Hitmonchan, but Breloom is the only one that's good. And the reason why this is important is because it becomes the only fighting type, like, out of it and Heracross, the 2 quad weak fighters, it can actually like do damage to Doug and threaten it a little bit. It has some interesting sets. I think SD Mach Punch is pretty cool. I think Stunloom is probably its best set. I also do like the Leech Seed set, but I don't think it's very like. I like the set, but I don't think it's very good. The other thing that bothers me about Loom, and this is my main gripe with the guy. Yes, it's a very good DD-tar answer. Yes, it's still very strong. Yes, Sleep is incredible. Sleep is like, it's not the highest Sleep user that I have on this list, but Sleep is very good, I think. My main issue with Loom is that Mence and Gar are like unbeatable for it, basically. Well, Mence is more beatable. You can run the interaction of like focus punching Mence a couple times, but eventually they're gonna like get wise to it, and they're gonna start bringing Mence in like fresh, and it's just like, well, like your Loom just keeps getting forced out basically, and you really don't want a slop that's like free entry for Mence. It's the same with Gengar. Like the better Loom sets are all mono fighting attackers, or all mono fighting attack moves, like Mach Sky, Mach Focus, Sky Focus, Brick Focus, stuff like that. The reason why this is a problem is because of Gengar. Gengar doesn't. It's most commonly paired with Tyranitar, or Loom is most commonly paired with Sutar, and the reason why that specifically is annoying is because Sutar doesn't kill Gar a lot of the time. You can pair Loom with something like Houndoom, but then you have to use a Houndoom, and that's kind of shit. I think Loom is incredibly disruptive in the right circumstance, but I think if a team has, if you run into like Gardug, it's kind of just like, oh well. The other nice thing about Loom is you can kind of use it as a breaker, and you can sack it to the opposing Doug, and then you can get in something like a Mence for free, but that can only happen really once, and it's just like why not just use Hera? It's just better at that. I legitimately, unless you like need Sleep, I see no reason why you wouldn't just use Hera over this guy. Hera gets much better coverage and like an actually useful ability. Next up, we're gonna go to Gyarados. Gyarados is a weird one for me. I have a hard time. There's a lot of cool things this guy can do, but I find myself either using 3 attacks or taunt like all the time. The main cool thing that I think is cool. Yeah, we're going great. The main thing that I think is cool that I can do is sub DD. Seems really good. Like sub DD, HP Fly EQ takes advantage of things to try to status it to beat it. It also allows it to get 2 DDs more consistently, which lets it beat stuff like Jolt and Arrow while being adamant still. The main problem with Gira is it is hardwalled by Skarm. Like, there is nothing even DD Taunt loses to Skarm, even with HP Rock. Even with like DD Taunt, HP Rock still loses to Skarm. Like, there's not a whole lot you can do. So you either need a Mag or you need ways to like keep Skarm low, which is doable for sure. On the teams that Gira gets used on a lot of times are either like Mag off with multiple DDers or it's Skarm beatdown, which both of those are like perfectly fine avenues to use Gira. I think especially DD Taunt is a lot more serviceable into stuff like Skarm. I think DD Taunt is a much better set than DD Taunt with no Mag is the way most of the time, I think. The other thing potentially that I think is a little underexplored is maybe DD Thunderwave. I think, or just Thunderwave bulky sets in general, I think could be pretty cool. I know DD Rest is a set that got explored a while back by UD. I think that set is fine, but I think it's a little weird. I do think Thunderwave on Gira is a move that's maybe a little underexplored, I think, because what would you be pairing with it? You could pair you could pair like an electric type. That could be interesting, and then switch out. That could be cool. Because actually, no, you pair the electric type and then you beat it with, you beat it next time. It's like if Jolt comes in, you beat it next time. That's kind of cool. I don't know. I would have to think about the lines for Thunderwave more, but I think it could be cool. Next up, this is the last Mon in B rank, Jolteon. I've had periods of going back and forth on like high versus low, like whether I want to rank this high or rank it low or whatever the fuck. But the thing I've had a realization recently, and I kind of realized for myself why a lot of top players are saying Jolt is better on spikeless, and that's that the lines that Subjolt creates with Doug are very, like, it's very cool. It's not trappable by opposing Doug. It can pass subs very easily. Baton Pass is a great move. And overall, like, you can set up Bliss Traps, like, very easily with Jolt, which is pretty cool. I think it's something that, I think the Jolt on spikeless is something that, like, needs to be explored more, because it's a very good archetype. Like, Jolt Guard Doug, I built a Jolt Guard Doug team recently. That's probably one of the better teams I've ever built, and it feels incredible to use when you have all that momentum. Like, and Jolt is a huge part of that. Like, I think like the spikes build with Jolt are still, like, usable. I think they're still fine. I just think they've kind of fallen off in the era where everybody and their mom is running a spinner. But I think that Jolt right now is perfectly serviceable, just not for the reasons it was like a couple years ago. So that's all for my B rank. We're gonna go to B plus now. There's only 3 guys in B plus. And my reasoning for there's one guy who might surprise you a little bit here, but first up is Fori. I think Fori is head and shoulders above Cloy still. I think it's, in terms of the spikers that are sticking around, I think it's head and shoulders above Cloy, but it's like nowhere near as good as Skarm. My reasoning for it being I guess this is pretty high for me on Fori. I've kind of had a realization recently that it's like not that bad. Versus teams that are like Toxskarm, and versus teams that are Toxskarm, you have the ability to spin for like pretty free, and Spikes with spin is great compression. It also gets access to like HP Bug, Boom, EQ. I think obviously it still has the same problem as Breloom, where you want to pair it with a Pursuit Mon to get rid of Gengar, but the thing that I've realized recently that's made Fori much better to me is that if you run it with a second spinner, it gets so much better, because you don't have to rely on it to spin. So you can actually run coverage moves like HP Bug that allow it to beat other spinners, or Earthquake. And Earthquake is, I think, a very important move on Fori. I think the fact that it's a Steel-type spiker that can beat Mag in that way, like you can EQ on Mag switching in, and actually kill it. And I think that's really valuable, and I think that's one of the reasons why you use Fori, is if you want to use like a defensive team that has a spiker that can beat Mag, or has an avenue with which it can beat Mag. It doesn't always beat Mag because you have to like get the play right, but if you want to use a spiker that can that technically gets trapped by Meg, or like one of the bulkier spikers like this or Skarm, and you want to actually be able to beat Meg in a way, I think Fori is a good pick for that. You have to keep in mind that it's still very owned by Gengar, and it's still very owned by every fire type, and like random Fire Punch on stuff like trolls it, but it's very capable of living most neutral hits like with ease. And I think the fact that it has Explosion as well is a very good trait, which is why I'm a little higher on it than I have been in the past. I have a couple Fori teams I like now. Next Pokemon in this tier. This is the one that might surprise some people. Is this the last BL? This is the last BL. Venu is the highest BL on my list. Now, I'm a big Venu believer. The reason for this is Sleep Powder plus Leech Seed is incredibly strong, plus that speed tier is even better. Hey, can you go away, please? I'm in the middle of something. Sorry about that. Sorry, where was I? That completely threw me off. Let me close my door. The combination of Sleep Powder and Leech Seed is very strong, especially with this speed tier. Like 284 is like that awkward speed tier where Zaps don't always account for you if they're that slow, and so you can be faster. You're still faster than like Molt and stuff like Heracross and stuff too. So you can get Sleep Out versus a lot of stuff. And Grass Move plus HP Ice is oftentimes like enough. And Leech Seed is really, really strong into defensive teams. Like clicking this versus a Blissey is better than just about anything like other stuff like Venu can do. Besides, I mean, Celebi can click Leech Seed too, obviously, but Venu is also very good at it, I think. And it's also like it's really hard to kill. It's also very good at endgaming versus, or it prevents endgames from stuff like Suicune very well, because Leech Seed just makes it so, like, if it's Last Moncoon or Last Mon Lax, it's like they're gonna die to Leech Seed eventually. Even if they have to rest, they're so much pressure is being put on them by the fact that they're seeded, and it makes it so they have to see a more or curse more to make it so like they can actually kill anything. It's very good Last Mon insurance as well, basically. So yeah, that's why Venu's so high. I think it's very good when paired with something like say like a Rachi or something that can switch into ice moves a little better. But its ability to switch into Thunderbolt and Hydro Pump is very cool, to say the least. You also can use Venu on teams where you want to use a more offensive Celebi too. Like if you want to run Double Grass, you can do that. You just have to make sure you can account for Ice Beam, basically. But yeah, that's Venu. Next up, last mon in this tier is gonna be Mag. So Mag is a weird one for me. Magnet, of course, is the best set, but I have a kind of a soft spot for lefties like sub or protect Mag. I think on the teams where you can fit it, I think it shines incredibly. I think Protect Mag in particular is probably one of its best filler moves right now, just in general. But I think my thing with Mag is it's like the fact that it can trap Skarm and Meta and low health Rachi and also do other things kind of sometimes is like really cool. I think that's awesome. But I think it needs lefties to do the other things sometimes. And so on a lot of teams, you're kind of losing out on that versatility. However, I definitely understand, because unless you're like Mag plus Spinner, a lot of the times letting Skarm roar you or letting Skarm get on multiple spikes is like really awkward, and Mag just kind of like Mag just not killing Skarm is like super awkward. So I definitely understand why people don't choose to run lefties, but I think lefties Mag is like really underrated. I really like that set. Next up is one of the recent OU additions, Zard. This is the next tier up. I forgot to mention that. So this is going to my A- rank now. Zard is next. Zard is cool. It's good on both spikes and spikeless. It's really only good on like hard offense though. It can be used. I've used it on TSS before, like a slower paced TSS team with Roar, and I think it's pretty good on that team. But it's the kind of thing where you have to build a team that can like account for it. But you have to build a team that accounts for Zard being there in the filler slot, basically. So this is my favorite set right now. This is a really solid breaker with spikes up, and just in general, like it's really good at breaking like fatter teams, especially if you get it in. The best way to use Zard is to get it in early and then click beat up versus Bliss. Like Bliss cannot do anything to you if you do that. Bliss like being that low for the rest of the game is like they can't they have a hard time recovering against. They have a hard time clicking recover against a lot of Zard teams with Bliss, which is cool. I think the other option that people use on Zard is they use like HP Ice and then they use like Brick Break or something, declaw slot, which is fine. I use that if I'm like 06 to Mix Ments, but I think the set is usually fine for the most part. I definitely understand people wanting to use Focus Punch over Beat Up, or people wanting to use a like Brick Break or something to deal with Tar better, but I think on teams where you have spikes, this set is more than sufficient. I think also clicking HP Grass into Tar repeatedly on switch in is like good enough. Like as long as you're not getting suited multiple times, I think it's fine. And a lot of the times the teams that Zard is on have other ways to beat Tar too, so it's just kind of annoying really. But eventually Tar will be in range where Tar will be in a range of two HP Grasses, so it's fine. The main problem with Zard is, again, the same problem from like Blaziken before, and Moltres soon after this is water types have a very, very, very easy time just coming in on this. Like Milo just sits on this. And so does Kuhn, and so does even like Gira can come in on this pretty easy. But the main, and Tar also can come in on it pretty easy, which is not something you really want, but the thing with Zard is you can run things to circumvent this. Like you can run Roar if you have spikes, and that helps with waters. Grass with spikes does some damage. Grass without spikes doesn't really, so usually you have to run it with like Zap or another water beater really. Or actually that's why Venu is so good with Zard. Venu Zard is a pretty common not common, but it's one of my favorite types of offense. You use Venu to chip down the bulky waters with Leech Seed, and like you put him to sleep. You click like Giga Drain, HP Grass, or whatever you want, like Razor Leaf maybe. You use Venu to sit on the bulky waters, and then you eventually get to the point where they're eventually in range of either Zard or another one of your finishers. I think it's a way that you can turn Venu Zard is a way that you can turn bulky waters being annoying into a source of momentum, which is cool. That's the kind of thing offense teams thrive off. Next up, this is where we start to get into like the super top tier Pokemon. I think I moved Zard a tier up from B+ because I really like it, but I can see it being B+ or A-. Either one works. I think I will move it down to B+ actually. So next up we have Starmie. The reason why this is so low is because it could be higher than this, like a few spots higher than this easily, but I think my main issue with it right now is that it's kind of outclassed as a spinner by Claydol right now. It has a good niche, obviously. It's a spinner that it's like it can do damage to Skarm and stuff, and it can. I think Def Me with Ice Beam is really good at checking Ments. I think Thunder Wave also works for that, but I think Ice Beam is way better at it. I think Psychic Def Me is a little underexplored too, but I think the fact that people are like using more Def Me than Off Me right now is really like what's pushing it down for me. I think Off Me at its peaks is a much better set, but Def Me is like, the fact that it can do things like sit on Pert is kind of crazy, but yeah, I think that's just kind of the product of everybody and their mother and their brother and their like dog is running a spinner right now, and so it's either Claydol or Starmie most of the time. Actually, all of the time pretty much, and so that's why Def Me is so high usage right now, because it's basically the other spinner. But it's like, yeah, the Def Me set, I think honestly it solos some teams, but against most teams I find it's like pretty whatever. But against like Big Five, like if you run Def Me that's faster than Gengar, I don't know what Big Five is supposed to do. Like you kind of just like the Gengar has to boom, and then you just go to like a teammate to absorb the boom, and all of a sudden Def Me just solos. Especially if it's like Big Five Molt, like Def Me kind of just fucks that up. unless it's T-Ball Bliss, but even then, T-Ball doesn't even 2KO, I don't think. Or it comes close, but it's like, if you have enough invest, like, definitely just wins anyway. So, yeah, that's Starmie. I will say though, I think Off Me is like deserving of a comeback. I just think it blanks a little too hard into Bliss right now, but I think it's also Off Me also like 6-0s every offensive team ever, which is super awesome. I think like Zap Doug Off Me is something that I want to build, so I'm gonna do that after we're done with this. But next up we have Snorlax. Snorlax, it still sees some use as a last mon. I think the best set right now is Curse Boom. Using it on Fizz-Off in particular, or Fizz-Off or Mag-Off. I think Curse Boom is really good. I think Curse EQ is also super solid. Curse normal move EQ. But I think generally, people that are trying to use Lax in roles other than Curse Boom are kind of like, it's okay in those roles, but I think Curse Boom is where it really, really shines. Like, it's really consistent at removing Scarm and getting Chip on Tar. I've been listening to this song for a minute. Oh, it's just long. Okay, never mind. I didn't realize how long it was. Okay, well, whoops. I think it's really consistent at removing Scarm or getting Chip on Tar, or on teams, there's some teams that just can't deal with Curse S-Ball EQ either, and they just like lose a bunch of Pokemon. I think Lax is at his best when you send him out, you let him do his thing, and then he just kind of is dead by the end of it. If you want to use Lax as like a one-time special check on offense teams, I think it's really not. Like the last mon Curse Lax stuff is still okay, but it's like it requires way too much setup to actually do anything in ADV. It's like okay, it's not great. But yeah, I think Lax is still I think Lax, the Curse Boom stuff that Lax does, is good enough to the point where it's all the way up here. I think that set is ridiculous. Next up, Doug. This is the highest ranked trapper on my list, besides like Pursuitar, I guess. But Doug is. I've been more high on Doug lately than I have been recently. Yes, it gives free turns to things like Zap, Arrow, Mence, Molt, Scarm, Gar, but it's like, and yes, those are all very top tier threats, but also the lines that you create with Doug are incredibly offense enabling, especially like trapping Bliss with Doug or trapping a low health Pert or something. It's a good feeling to be able to get that much value out of this guy. Like, all you really want him to do is click Earthquake and sometimes beat up, and like rarely you want him to click Bug and Ace to clear out like fighters and Celebi. But I think the offense teams that Doug enables are very cool and very fun. And I think they're very good for the meta. I think the stall teams that it's used on also kind of fold if Doug gets crit. So they're kind of like, well, they don't fold, but it's like very annoying because all of a sudden like the Tar is still alive and the Bliss is still alive, and it's like, because they kind of rely on Doug to beat DD Tar. But at the same time, of course Doug has his weaknesses, but I think the benefit of trapping that many strong Pokemon, DD Tar, Meta, low health Pert, Blissey, a lot of Rachi sets, low health Suicune, Hera, Loom, other Doug, like Starmie, like all that stuff is incredibly valuable, and I think that's why Doug is still so omnipresent, is because it still has a very, very strong niche. Now, well, of course, I just said nothing in the last like sentence. That was pretty cool, but the fact that Doug can still trap all that stuff so effectively is like why it's still so good, basically. You can get rid of like specials. You can get rid of like special switch-ins, and all of a sudden, boom! Like your Zapdos is now has no switch-in whatsoever. The next Pokemon on here is gonna be Moltres, second to last Pokemon in my A- rank. Moltres is very good. This guy is quite strong. 382 special attack is a lot. 383 even with no IV drop, but like Flame, I think Flame Grass is pretty much required, or Fire Blast Grass, whatever you want to do. After, I guess, I think Flame is better on Modest sets. Fire Blast is better on Timid, I think, but if you, there's a couple cool options for the last 2 slots. I think Wisp Roar is pretty common. I think Overheat Roar is also very common. I've been using more Overheat Roar recently. I think Protox is also really undervalued. Protect Molt is really cool because it flips the Arrow matchup on its head. It turns Arrow from a source of momentum for your opponent to, oops, all of a sudden you saw what they locked into and all of a sudden you get a free turn. I think that is a really cool, underrated aspect of Molt. And that's something you can also do with Zap, but not to the same extent, because well, actually to exactly the same extent, yeah. But Zap oftentimes doesn't have move slot space for Protect, where Molt does. Molt also doesn't really, but depending on the team, it definitely can. Which is cool. Last Pokemon in this tier is Heracross. Heracross is one of the most threatening physical attackers, if not the most, in the entire tier. Megahorn is a move with like 2 total switch-ins in the entirety of the ADV. And you combine that with Stab Brick Break and Rock Slide and sometimes even HP Ghost, and all of a sudden you have a very, very scary Pokemon. This guy is, of course, weak to Doug. It's weak to things that are faster with moves like Psychic. It has a hard time into Mence and Scarm as well, but these are all, like, it kind of can break for itself if you run the same interaction over and over again, as long as they don't have a Doug. And it can also create situations where it's really good at abusing Bliss, especially with Guts. This is the other Guts guy I was talking about. Besides Machamp, Hera just does it but better. Like, I think the Guts 4 attack set with Hera is very crazy. Megahorn, fighting move of your choice, either Brick Breaker, Focus Punch, Rock Slide, and HP Ghost is incredibly solid. I think SD 3 attacks is also good. The Salax stuff is probably the worst set right now. I think generally Hera is at his best when you're using him as a mid-game breaker and Bliss Punisher. Okay. Alright, we're up to A rank now. We only have 13 Pokemon to go. Wow, we're getting there. So next up we have Arrow. Arrow has more sets than you'd think. There's 2. There's the Sub-Leechy set, which only sees use on like SD Pass and on Ladder where people are bad, and the CB set, but CB has a couple variations. There's the classic Back Arrow, which is like what spikes down. It's one of the most classic Revenge Killers and Win Cons in the entire tier. But there's also the Lead CB Arrow set, which is not very common, because that means you don't get to have an arrow in the back. But it's interesting in the way that it's one of the few leads that can Oko Tar with HP Fighting and Oko Zap and Mence with Rock Slide. Well, Mence if you drop speed and go Adamant, it's fine. Like that, then you Oko with Rock Slide. And it's different. Do you Oko? I don't know, but you do it. The main thing is the Intimidate drop, but you do a lot of damage either way, and it's very good at making things awkward for your opponent. And unless they have like a Scarm or like a Suicune lead, it usually forces a switch, which can be good. Like if you think they're gonna go into a Scarm on turn 1 to like soft check and scout the move, you can go to the Magnets on the back or something. It's very good at creating awkward lines early, but I think a lot of the time the payoff that you get from those lines is just worse than a lot of other leads. Which is why I think the classic back CB Arrow is like the best set by a wide margin. Usually I prefer Bug instead of Fly to create better lines with Celebi, but either's fine. Next up, we have Rachi. Jirachi is someone who I could see going much higher on my list. The reason why it's low right now is because I'm not really convinced by... I think Astarachi is very good, but I'm not really convinced by it in a lot of matchups. Mostly in matchups that have multiple Pokemon that click EQ, or like a Doug or something. Something faster that clicks Earthquake really annoys Astarachi. As well as Spikes being down, like Skarmogar is also a pretty annoying matchup for it, weirdly enough. Because if Spikes stay down, like Astarachi all of a sudden can't switch into half the shit it could before. And it's just like not great. I think Super Rachi is very underrated. I think it's really at its best with Doug. It can be used without it, but it's not super great without it. Sub-CM is still Sub-CM. There's Freeze Claw now though, so lol. I think Sub-CM Psychic is a little underexplored. Like Sub-CM Psychic T-Bolt or Sub-CM Psychic Fire Punch or something is a little underexplored. I think the main problem with Psychic on Rachi though is you're gonna run into like a Tar and it's gonna be really awkward. The move that you're dropping, you want the last move to be neutral versus meta and Tar. And that means you're not killing meta and Tar. I'm sorry, I yawned again, my fault. But yeah, I mean Rachi can still abuse the shit out of Bliss. Can still get like if it gets a freeze on Bliss, can still just win the game. You know, it still has its bullshit like that. But and then there's also the weird like mix Rachi like dynamic punch sets. I like those sets if you run like HP fighting. Like HP fighting B-Slime I think is pretty cool. Or I guess B-Slime dynamic punch. I think it's pretty cool, but I think the fact that you have to hit dynamic punch is a little strange. It's a good set though. It's a good set. It's just very underused. It's very awkward to switch into its mix. I'll say that. Next up, Zapdos. I think the fact that Zap is this low probably says a lot about me as a person. I have Zap currently at 11, which is pretty low, but I think... Okay, here's my reasoning for this. I think Off Zap is very, very good when you don't need it to switch into things. I think when you're saying it has no defensive utility, you don't think of it as a Pokemon that's contributing to your defenses at all. I think it's very good. I think that strong of a T-Bolt, plus that strong of a hidden power, plus access to T-Wave, Toxic, Baton Pass, Protect, all that bullshit, makes it a very good Pokemon. However, I think Rest Zap as well is like one of the best sets in ADV. I think the full special defense T-Bolt, Roar, Sleep Talk, Rest is incredible. It's hacks through so many matchups. It's unkillable against a lot of teams. It's like that set is legitimately one of the biggest demons in the entire tier to actually take out. I think my problem with Off Zap is there's also lead Sub Zap, of course, which is still fine. But I think my problem with Off Zap is the people that are trying to run like the bulky no special attack invested Zapdos, like to live things. I think that's just not. I think if you're doing that, you're using Zapdos wrong. I think generally you want to pump special attack on this guy. I think doing that makes it so you can break through like Claydolls and Rachis and things like that that otherwise are just sitting in your way. But they're both Zapdos is I think another set that's really underrated is Drill Peck. You just run max attack Lonely and just peck the shit out of Super Beat, probably Okos. Do a nice amount of damage to Blissey with Spikes down too. Like it's good. Fight Zap is also pretty usable. It's just you have to know. I think Zap is a mon that rewards like making good doubles to get it back back in and putting it in very threatening positions, because it definitely threatens a lot of teams. It's just there's mons that give it a hard time, like Blissey, Spidef Astarashi, Spidef Celebi, Claydol, Snorlax. All those guys can kind of give it a hard time, but a lot of those guys can get worn down. So Zapdos is also one of the best Pokemon at keeping momentum with spikes with the Baton Pass. So yeah, that's Zapdos. Next is Claydol. I was a lot lower on Claydol until recently when I discovered that 273 Claydol is insane. It's so good. Like, Jolly max speed Claydol is so fucking good. Like, you get surprise booms on DD Ments, you outspeed everything in that whole speed tier to boom on it. You can still spin, your EQs still do fine damage to Tar. Your Psychics are still doing, like, passable damage to Gengar. You can also run Rock Slide if you really want to help deal with, like, fires. Like, sometimes you can catch Molt being really slow, and you can outspeed it, and you can kill it, which is super awesome. You can also catch really slow Zaps with that speed, but it's just, like, it's faster than Rust Zap, it's faster than Defcon, it's faster than all that stuff. That set is really good on offense, where you don't need to be that bulky. Bulky Claydol is still good. I like 245 Claydol and 222 Claydol a lot as well. In terms of speed stats, I think generally I like Speed Invest. I think you can go full bulk. It's that full bulk is still fine though. If you want your EQ to do a lot of damage, that's still fine. I think though, the fact that it's so good at soft checking so much is what makes it good right now. I think I wish Rock Slide Doll was better, or S-Ball Doll. I wish those were both better, but unfortunately, EQ Boom Rapid Spin is like pretty mandatory. I think so. Whatever. I've seen some crackheads use like Rest and even Refresh in this year, and I don't think either of those are super good. Next up, we have Celebi. Celebi is a very versatile Pokemon. On offense, you can run like Super Bee. Yeah, I'll show this up. Offense, you can run Super Bee, which is a good special check while also maintaining a lot of pressure and being able to just win on its own sometimes. Has some trouble with Bliss, and then people are still using the defensive sets with Leech Seed too. These sets are at their best with Rapid Spin support, and also if you're not going to run HP Fire, I really like Mag support with it as well. Or at the very least, like a good Fire type. Like a Fire type and maybe a Zapdos too. Like, you want to have the ability to put pressure on Skarm, and this set really doesn't do that, but this set is really, really hard to kill. This set, on top of being an excellent special check to things that aren't fire moves, soft checks like basically the entire tier that isn't a fire type. Even the stuff that is HP Bug, like Bug isn't OHKOing it. So you can still recover it, you can still get chip and recover. Like, it's, you can run as much speed as you want on it basically. Like, it's, you can run 244, but you can also go up to like 280, 290, even 328 if you really want. 328, I wouldn't advise it, but it's still like, you can still do it. It also doesn't die from full with max HP to Doug HP Bug, so that is a pretty cool trait of this set. But yeah, there's all sorts of cool tech moves you can run too, like Heal Bell, Perish Song. You can also run XD Pass is still a thing. CM Pass is also still a thing. Neither of those are super great right now. Yeah, Celebi is still a very good Pokemon though. Next up is a personal favorite of mine, Suicune. So we've officially breached the top 10. So Claydol was 10. Celebi was 9. Suicune will be number 8. So I like Suicune a whole lot. I think the offensive set is one of my favorite sets. I think it can muscle past a lot with CM Pump Ice Beam, and then in the last slot there's a lot of cool choices. You can run HP Elect or HP Grass. Toxic is very good. It forces out Bliss eventually. Protect is also very good for scouting booms. Sub too is very cool for similar reasons. Sub also lets you set up on stuff. It's like a multi-turn Protect in a lot of cases. I think the nature choice is also very important on Kuhn. I think on defensive, the choice between bold and modest can determine a lot. I prefer modest personally, but bold is still like the unkillable monster that it is normally. I think, of course, on defensive, you have the choice between CM Sleep Talk and you have the choice between Rest Talk and CM Roar too. I think both of those are great. I prefer Roar personally, but they both have their merits for sure. And then on the offensive set, the nature choice between modest and timid, I think, is very interesting. Timid off-Kun is something that I have been thinking about a lot recently, and I think it's really, really good in theory. I think if you can run a lot of speed on something to surprise something, I think why not do it? Like, timid off-Kun that outspeeds, like, Zap, Molt, Gira, well, Jolly Gira, I guess. Like, Zap, Molt, Hera, like, all that stuff in there is just, like, if you run, like, 280 something to outspeed, like, the slower Zaps, too, it's, like, all of a sudden you click Calm Mind, and you're faster, and you 2-hit KO with Ice Beam, or you Oka, or you do like 1,000,000 with Ice Beam, and you don't even come close to dying to T-Ball, and it's like, oh shit. Like, you just 1v1 Zap with Kun. Like, that's, like, with off-Kun, no less. That's pretty cool. I think another really underrated Suicune set is the Sub-Rain Dance set. I think that is really cool. It's really, really, really hard to justify, I think, compared to, like, Sub-Ice Beam, but I think Sub-Rain Dance is a very cool idea if you're looking to weather clear. Okay, so that is the end of my A rank. We're going to get into A+ rank now, so it's the second to last tier on the list, starting with Blissey. Blissey is still the same broken-ass blob it's always been. CM Bliss is good. Flame Bliss is really underrated. Still can run stuff like Counter if you really want, or Aroma, or I think Wish Bliss is really good too. It's still has the same problems of physical attackers being able to come in on it for pretty free unpredicted soft turns and things like that. Of course it can run things like T-Wave and Toxic to disrupt them, but at the same time, like if you T-Wave a Heracross, you lose the game a lot of time, or you lose 3 Pokemon at least. So you have to be a little careful around things like that. But yeah, Blissey's still the same, does the same shit it's always done. Modest Bliss is the best spread, by the way. But yeah, I mean, the classic Ice Beam Toss soft T-Wave is still incredible. It's still the best special wall in the tier by a wide margin. Not a wide margin. I think Spit of Celebi is very good too, but I think Blissey blanket checks so much in one, like it's so impossible to quantify. If you like, it's like there's so many special attackers that are held back by Blissey. Gengar is very cool. I think there's not many reasons to stray from T-Bolt, Ice, Wisp, Boom, but if you can fit things like Fire or Giga Drain / HP Grass or D-Bond or Wisp, you can run Wisp Taunt instead of Wisp Boom and achieve similar things. But Boom is just really nice for sequencing against stuff like Suicune. If you can fit like Wisp Taunt, if you can fit like Giga Drain or Fire Punch, they can be very annoying picks. D-Bond is cool as well. Hypnosis is what you use if you're an asshole. The Nightshade, the physical Gar set with like Nightshade, Focus Punch, Explosion, I think is also cool. I don't really like use it on that much. I think it's fine on certain offensive teams, but I think on those teams you'd often rather just have the special coverage anyway. Focus Punch Gar is cool though. I think Focus Punch Gar, that can, because Focus Punch is nice because it can click into incoming Blissey and T-Tar, and then you can explode on the Bliss, or you just killed the T-Tar, which is pretty cool. It's like flips the Suitar matchup on its head. Yeah, but Gengar is still like 110, so it's above base 100s. It still can bulk out for Suitar or for Salamence, like both are fine. You can't do both, obviously. It's still one of the most annoying disruptors in the tier and one of the best Pokemon on Spikes builds and on non-Spikes builds. But it really shines on builds it really shines on builds that are looking to keep Spikes up. It's like so good on any kind of on Spikes teams that are looking to still maintain offensive presence. It is probably the best Pokemon on those teams a lot of the time. Next up we have Swampert. Swampert is the unbreakable physical wall of the tier. It's like, I think the fact that it is, I prefer it as a physical wall to meta, but I think the other things that meta does while still being a physical wall are why it's below meta right now for me. I think Pert has Pert's damage output a lot of times I think is kind of lacking, but the fact that it still does so much is crazy. I think Off Pert is ridiculous. I think Brave Pert with EQ Bug Focus Punch is great. I think Quiet Pert with Pump, Ice Beam, even HP Grass is great. I think people need to explore like Sub Pert more, like Sub Pitaya Pert could be really cool. And End Pert is of course still around. It's not as common, but it's still a demon whenever you run into it. That said, it's still crazy. Still loses the same stuff it did before, but it's still still incredibly hard to beat for a lot of defensive teams. I do think though that Pert could be even lower next time I do one of these. I do like it, and I think the fact that it's able to switch in blanket checks so much is very, very important for the meta, but I think it's just not as good as, I definitely prefer meta as my rock resist. But next up, Salamence. This guy still does what he's always done, pretty much. There's four sets. In order of how good they are, I think it's DD, then Mix, then CB, then Wish. I think that is my order. DD Mence is a ridiculous endgamer. That guy has won me so many games I had no business winning. The Spit F DD shit is so crazy too. Like, that stuff is so good. The fact that you can set up on Arrow sometimes too, like with Intimidate, is ridiculous. Like, you can set up on Arrow and then win. Like, that's crazy to me. I think also Mixed Mence is super duper. Mixed Mence I feel like is like, it's a very, very good set that you have to account for in the builder. But I think a lot of the time, like, I think sometimes people get so focused on like DD that they just kind of, at least that happens to me. I get so focused on how good DD is that I just forget how good Mixed is, and I think about it and I'm like, oh shit. But Mixed, the reason why it's not as good as DD is because it doesn't have the power to break past waters without spikes down at all. It's incredibly good at frying Scarm. It's incredibly good at beating Pert. It's incredibly good at getting chip onto things with Dragon Claw, but has a hard time with Bliss unless you run like the max attack stuff with Brick Break, which I think that set is very good, but I think max attack Mixed Mence with Brick Break is pretty crazy. But I also think that special attack Mixed Mence, or plus special attack Mixed Mence, is very good. I like plus speed too. I think all three are pretty valid. But with Mixed Mence, you need Sand and Spikes, I would say, like as a general rule. The next set would be CB. I have realized recently CB is very good. Contrary to Mixed Mence, you actually don't want Sand, and usually it's fine without Spikes too. It's very good at punishing a lot of things. It does a lot of damage to most teams. It can put a lot of teams in very awkward positions while still accomplishing the role of like checking fighters and things like that. I usually like to pair it with Wish Bliss, and Wish Bliss and Mag I think are pretty required. But I still think like CB Mence is very good. I think. And then Wish Mence, I don't really think about it. It's like okay. It's hard to break for some teams, but it's like okay. But yeah, I think the fact that Mence can accomplish all 4 of those roles like pretty well, and is generally one of the best offensive Pokemon in the whole tier, I think that puts it like I'm preferring it to Arrow recently as my last mon on teams where it needs to be like a physical endgamer. I'm preferring DD Mence to Arrow recently. They're both still very good, but DD Mence is just like ridiculous. It's the best. It's one of my favorite sets in the tier. Next up, last Pokemon in A+, Metagross. This guy is incredibly versatile as well. Agility is really good at checking a wide majority of things. Mash EQ Boom Tech is like, why would you ever need anything else? Bandit is also really good on faster teams. It's really good at blowing up Skarm, really good at getting chip onto things with. It's really good at like, if you have another Pokemon to blow up Skarm too, it's really good at killing things with Meteor Mash in the late game. I think a set that people don't talk about on teams where if you're running Gross plus Pert, you can run like Mash EQ Grass Boom, which is a super cool Gross set. And you can also go into stuff like T-Punch Grass or stuff like Mash Psychic Fire Boom. I don't like mixed meta as much besides Astagros, which is Mash EQ Grass. I don't like mixed meta as much. I think it kind of fails to do damage on both sides, which is awkward. I think the fact that Mash does pitiful damage to like everything with, or not pitiful, but it does way less than physical meta with Mix, and it's just like you miss it so much when you run Mix. I mean, I think Mix is really good at landing booms onto things that it wants to land booms onto, like water types in particular. Like Suicune and Milo get boomed by mixed meta like a lot, but the thing with mixed meta is that if your opponent doesn't have those and you can't find a boom target, like you're stuck doing you're stuck not doing any damage to things like Pert. Like Psy does like 40, I think, and then you just die to Earthquake because you don't die, but you take so much from Earthquake because you're mixed meta. That is the problem with mixed meta, is it's usually no bulk. But between CB, bulky, and agility, like those, like if it didn't even run mix, I think it would still be like as high as it is. Those 3 sets are so good. Like bulky meta is, it's not the sturdy. Sorry. It's not the sturdiest rock answer on its own, but if you pair it with like a Claydol, it becomes like this. It's really good at checking both Tar and Arrow, and it's like, and even Mence, like it's so good. It's so good. Clear Body is so good. Like meta is just, this mon is so fucked up. All right, last 2 Pokemon. My second best Pokemon in the tier is, of course, this guy. I considered swapping it with Meta for the sole reason that I haven't been using as much Spike stuff recently, and I haven't missed him as much as I thought I would, but in a lot of matchups, this guy holds so many Pokemon back. This guy solos so many teams. You never really need anything other than Spikes, Protect, Roar, and then Drill Peck or Toxic. Like, there are teams where Taunt is good, there are teams where Thief is good, there are teams where YOLO is good, but they're all like, well, YOLO and good is a little bit of a, like, oxymoron, but, like, this guy just solos so many teams on his own, is really, really, really hard to kill. Like, you cannot consistently kill him unless you have a Mag, generally. Or you're like you could be like special offense teams, of course, beat the shit out of him, but even then, like, he can still get a Spike usually before he dies. And then versus Fizzoff, like, the whole reason why Fizzoff is constructed the way it is to beat down Skarm. Like, Skarm farms bad teams so hard. Like, if you do not have a plan for Skarmory in your builder, you are losing the game to Skarmory. Like, you can't just bullshit your way through Skarmory and pray. You have to have a definitive plan for Skarmory in your builder, and if you don't, then you are going to lose. Like, you need ways to force it out. You need ways to deal with spikes in particular. The fact that Skarmory is the best spiker in a tier where spikes are so centralizing is part of the reason why it is number 2. It's also that it has access to so many, like, it fits on, like, so many teams. And it has access to so many good utility moves. And its bulk is so good. It doesn't die to hardly anything that isn't, like, T-Bolt or Fire Blast, basically. It's a great boom switch in. It's like a really good physical answer. Protox Skarm still solos teams. Drill Peck makes it so 40 can't spin forever. It also makes it so fighters have a harder time versus it. It can get put in some awkward situations, but that's true of every Pokemon, every defensive Pokemon. Like, they're all like that. And last but not least, you all know who it is. It's the big man himself, Tyranitar. I think his combination of versatility and setting sand is like the amount of sets that Tar can run is basically unmatched in this tier. Between BKC Tar, DD Tar, there's Mixed Tar, Pursuit Tar, there's even random like Sub Tar. There's like Boa still sees like very fringe use. You can see like C came up with Thor Tar a while back, which is basically just Boa Tar but it runs Thunder instead of T-Bolt. I don't know if C came up with that actually, but it's it was a set I got from him. But yeah, there's so many crazy Tar sets that you can run to patch up pretty much any hole. I think the like BKC Tar sets, but dropping Bug for like Fire Blast or HP Grass are super crazy. I think Salac Mixed Tar is crazy. I think there's so many variations on DD. Like you can, like in the last slot instead of Bug, you can run Double Edge, Focus Punch, Fire Blast if you really want to. You can run Endure with a Salac or a Lychee. It's just like there's so much stuff you can do. Tar is one of the most versatile Pokemon. Every team needs a plan for DD Tar. Every team needs a plan for Pursuit Tar, Mixed Tar, etc. You need a plan for every Tar set, basically. If you don't have a plan, you will lose either off momentum or off getting raw 6-0. And that's just like something. That's just how good this guy is. I mean, there's a reason why the lowest he's been ranked on VRs in the last like many years is 2, and that was only by like 2 people who think Skarm is just slightly better. And those people are stupid. Tar is just so fucking good. There's a reason why everything is centralized around 243 speed and 222 speed, and like why everything, and 221 speed. I mean, there's a reason why everything needs to be faster than those, is because those are Tar benchmarks, and if you're not faster than those, you're gonna lose. He's on like so many teams that being faster than him is such an important benchmark. But yeah, I think here I'll give some underrated choices for Tar. I think Salac Mixed Tar I already mentioned. DD Grass Tar, it's still good, still crazy. DD Double Edge Tar also super good. Tauntox Tar still awesome. Protox Tar is also really good. I like Protect in the lead slot a lot. Helps you not even have to think about it. It basically lets you not think versus Mence and Metaturn 1. You just click Protect and you click Protect and then you see what they do after. Basically, like it's very easy to. It's very easy. It creates very simplified early game lines. It's super awesome, but. Yeah, that is the viability ranking. I need some water. I ran out of water at about the 20-minute mark, and I've been recording for 2 hours and 30 minutes. So that should tell you about how things are going right now. But yeah, as I already said, I'm gonna include a link to the image version of this in the description. as well as a spreadsheet version of this. And yeah, you can take a look at those for more visual views if that's what you're into. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I know this is some more serious content. I don't typically make these kinds of videos, but if you are if you're interested in more of this type of content, please let me know. I'm definitely down to go more in depth on any of these Pokemon or talk about like some teams or anything like that. If you want more serious content, just let me know, and I am happy to oblige. But yeah, that's gonna be all from me for now. I'll see you guys whenever I decide to upload next. Could be tomorrow, could be like next year. Well, you never know. Also, let me know if you guys want to discuss. If you guys have anything you'd like to discuss about this, go ahead and drop a comment. I think I'll be looking at most of them. I'll be replying, maybe. Who knows? I think generally I don't think my opinions are super outlandish. Outside of a couple Pokemon, I think generally my opinions on lower tier mons are a little weird, but that's because I don't really know where to place a lot of them. But I think when you get to the higher tier Pokemon, it's all pretty like, I think my opinions are pretty well justified up there. But yeah, that's gonna be all from me. I'll talk to you guys next time I upload. See ya.